Busisiwe Mkhwebane, the former public protector, she will be a member of parliament for the EFF. She's on their list. Her husband, David Skosana, will be a member of parliament from Umkhonto we Sizwe. Now, I know we've had it several times when people from the same family, people who've been married to each other, have been MPs in the same party. It's happened in the ANC a couple of times that I can think of, in the same cabinet a couple of times I can think of. But at different parties, this is a new one for me. I've not heard that before. I don't know if you can think of any sort of cases of that. I thought that was interesting. A couple of other stories that I think are quite important. City Power, you heard in the news, implementing load reduction. We'll hear from City Power. We'll speak to their CEO. What exactly they're doing. Is it a switch off? Is it something else? They say that there'll be, I know in some places they can switch off your geyser. That makes sense to do that, to time it. But certainly something going on there. And I don't quite understand why they're doing it and if illegal connections are a big part of it. And I suspect that illegal connections may well be a big part of it. And this terrible story coming out of Khayelitsha, where 4 people were killed at a barbershop, 3 of them children. One was a 4-year-old girl. Now, I've asked this question before. Who does that? How does that even happen? That you have the situation where people are just, spraying a barbershop. I mean, it's just the most terrible thing where you kill 4 people, including a 4-year-old girl. 3 of them were children. And then one last note, if you're in the auditing business, you might want to know this. And we've seen how important auditors are. The Department of Finance has now issued new regulations in terms of the fines for auditors. And if auditors do the wrong thing deliberately, they can now be fined up to 10 million rand individually and 25 million rand for a company. And that's to stop things like VBS, where we saw such terrible things happening with the connivance, the empowerment, the enablement of the auditors. So we look at that as well. Good to have you along this morning. You know the number 086 000 2032. What do you think is going to happen with coalitions? Your memories of comrades, MPs from the same family in different parties, your thoughts. You can SMS 41391, tweet SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes. Send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. Good morning. You with SFM. Nice to have you along. It's 6:15.
Which is the best way to reach success? Is it best to go alone so you can go fast? Or for many to go together so they can go far? What if you need to go fast and far? At RMB, we believe the best way to success doesn't make you choose when both are possible. When you need a thoughtful solution for financial complexity, there are only 3 letters you need to know. RMB, a division of First Rand Bank Limited, an authorized FSP and registered credit provider.
Are you ready to empower yourself with an accredited tertiary qualification? Stadio Higher Education's distance learning programs will set you up for success. Whether you're balancing work and family or you're a school leaver who must work to support yourself and your studies, Stadio offers access to high-quality, affordable qualifications in law, teacher education, commerce, admin and management, policing, and more. Mid-year applications are now open. Visit stadio.ac.za and register today. Stadio, a new vision in higher education.
And we will buy 500 cars, and we will buy 500 more. Just to be the one who buys your car, will come to you and offer more. We buy cars, we buy cars. We buy cars, we buy cars.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
And Musa, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
I was going to say, how was your comrades, but you're awake, so clearly you didn't run it, and neither did I, and no, I never will.
Same here. Not in my lifetime. No.
That's funny. No, not in my lifetime either. What's coming up today?
Well, as the deadline approaches to set up a new government, political parties will be reporting back on their coalition talks. The ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula, he's expected to brief the media on the outcomes of the party's special NEC and its coalition talks with the different parties held at the weekend. The DA's Federal Council also expected to give an update following its federal executive's coalition talks with the ANC and other parties over the past 2 days. The EFF also expected to brief the media on its coalition talks with other political parties, including the ANC and the MK party.
My word, it's coalition day and we haven't even started yet.
Yeah. The IFP's NEC also will receive a report back from its coalition task team. And a legal move by the MK party, lawyers have sent sent a letter of demand to the Secretary of Parliament and the Chief Justice, asking both officers to refrain from convening the first sitting of Parliament. And this demand coming after the IEC officially handed over the lists of members of Parliament and provincial legislatures to the Chief Justice, who then handed them over to the Secretary of Parliament, and that basically paving the way for the swearing in of members soon. But the MK Party, we know, has had a number of grievances since the results were declared by the IEC, and the IEC also facing legal challenges seeking to nullify the recent election results.
So it all comes down to the evidence, and we haven't seen the evidences yet.
Correct. And in court, the trial of husband and wife Sibusiso and Lerato Mahlangu, who's accused of killing Lerato's ex-boyfriend and the father of a child, will resume in the High Court in Pretoria today, and the two are accused of killing Sibusiso to claim life insurance, and they are facing premeditated murder charges, fraud and defeating the ends of justice. In the Eastern Cape, the Safety MEC Xolile Nqata, together with the provincial police top brass, they are expected to visit the family of 6 deceased members, and the family members were killed last week. They were killed in 3 different homes they occupied in the area. And just lastly, City Power has warned Johannesburg residents that it will implement load reduction to protect the grid from total collapse, and that's starting from today. And Eskom also saying that load shedding will continue to remain suspended until further notice.
And Musa, thank you very much indeed. We'll try to speak to the CEO at City Power a little later in the programme, just try and get an understanding of what exactly the situation is. I'm not entirely sure why at this point we need load reduction. And thank you. We'll be listening on the radio 20 minutes after 6.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes. The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga.
Let's start with your story, how things used to be and when things changed.
So, my kids were staying with my mom, who passed on in 2020. Then I had to take them. At first, everything was okay until we moved. That's when I noticed a change of behavior on my older daughter. She started with smoking weed. And I was on her case. She then said, can I please take her to the rehab for that, because she can't leave it on her own.
Yeah.
I then took her to a private rehab in Bloemfontein. Well, she came back, she was okay, she was doing well until September last year. That's when everything started changing, the behavior. She started being untidy, started having short temper. It was a mess with her.
Utabile Ndai, who is a mother to a daughter who I believe is now 19, around about 19, currently in rehab.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Let's look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane fine, a low of 5, a high of 17. Johannesburg fine, morning frost in places, 2 and 16. Vereeniging fine, morning frost in places, -1 and 17. Bombela fine, morning fog patches, 6 and 19. Polokwane fine, 2 and 17. Mahakeng fine, 4 and 16. Vryburg fine, 2 and 19. Mangaung fine, 1 and 17. Kimberley fine, 5 and 18. Uppington fine and windy, 9 and 22. Cape Town fine, a light easterly wind, 14 and 26. George fine, a light and variable wind, 7 and 20. Gqeberha fine, a light easterly wind, 5 and 23. East London fine, a light northwesterly wind, 9 and 22. eThekwini fine, a light to moderate northerly wind, 10 and 23. Richards Bay fine, a light to moderate northerly to northeasterly wind, 7 and 24. And Pietermaritzburg this morning, fine, 4 and 20.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international news.
Well, in Israel this morning, the man considered to be the Prime Minister, let me start again. In Israel, the man considered to be the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu's main political challenger, Benny Gantz, has resigned from the government, saying Netanyahu is putting political considerations ahead of strategic decisions. It comes after a raid by the Israeli Defense Force on a refugee camp in Gaza over the weekend. It rescued 4 Israeli hostages who had been kidnapped in October last year. During the raid, 274 people were killed, including many women and children. Naeem Jina is the senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Naeem, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
Firstly, this raid that's killed so many people and rescued 4 hostages, does this change the situation at all? I mean, it may help Netanyahu a little, I suppose. It's such a big number of people who were killed.
In any kind of normal situation, this would be quite scandalous. 270 Palestinians killed, 4 Israelis killed in the process, and 4 Israelis rescued. And the attackers or rescuers, however you want to put it, came in from what is supposed to be a humanitarian pier on aid trucks to conduct their exercise. It would be scandalous under any normal circumstances. In this one, it's as Israel has been doing for the past 9 months, it just gets away with the worst kind of atrocities, and it seems like it will this time as well.
I imagine Israel will say that this is also proof of how Hamas operates, that it hides behind civilians. I mean, will they not come and say, well, the hostages were being held with civilians deliberately? I mean, this is where this entire thing gets quite complicated.
Yes, they've already said that. Firstly, of course, the situation in Gaza is such that the captives are being moved from place to place, and certainly at some points they would be among civilians. But also that whole argument is, if we were to take that argument to its logical conclusion, the middle of Tel Aviv would be a legitimate target. Because the Ministry of Defense of Israel is located in the middle of Tel Aviv with about 20 schools around it. It's not a legitimate target. And the fact that you go in with the kind of power that they did from air, land, and sea, knowing that there was no other option but the kind of massacre that took place with that kind of firepower, is certainly not acceptable under international law or under any sense of normalcy or decency. Massive kind of operation in order to, as I said, rescue 4 people but kill 274 others.
The resignation of Benny Gantz, I mean, he's basically said in public Netanyahu is putting politics, and I presume he means the politics of Netanyahu's personal survival, before, and this is important in this context, before the people of Israel. That's surely a big political statement to make. I mean, he's basically saying that Netanyahu's personal agenda is sort of being placed above Israel's future. I mean, that's a big thing.
Yes, but it's not the first time that Gantz has said that kind of thing. I mean, he was a little more muted while he was part of the war cabinet. He said that before. Remember, we've spoken on many occasions about the protests against Netanyahu before October last year. So he has intimated that kind of thing. As I said, he was a little muted during the past 9 months, but now in his resignation has made that point, and it seems that his resignation and that kind of speech comes with American support. The Americans also want to be rid of Netanyahu, it seems.
And Gantz is demanding early elections. I mean, is there any chance of that in Israel?
No, not really. I mean, Netanyahu's majority in parliament is very slim. He's got 64 seats out of 120, which means that except for one party that has 1 seat in the coalition, any other party that leaves the coalition, it'll crash. But as long as the coalition stays together, there's no reason for him to have elections. Certainly not because Gantz is demanding it.
Naeem Gina, thanks very much indeed. Senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Gladestein, I hope she's still in bed. I really do.
Yes. What a historic day for her yesterday. Not only did she win the Comrades, but also set a new record. It was a record-breaking time of 5 hours, 49 minutes and 46 seconds. And that was Gladestein's incredible performance. Saw her lead from start to finish in the Comrades Marathon yesterday, increasing her pace to shatter her own up-run record. Alexandra Morozova took second place in the time of 6 hours, 5 minutes, 12 seconds, while Courtney Olsen finished in third. Steyn is already focusing now on representing South Africa at the Olympics.
I hope that something like this will be inspiring for young athletes and for older people as well, not just young athletes, other people in other professions, to go after difficult things and to make a success out of it. And with that thought in mind, that's how I'm going to approach the Olympics.
And in the men's race, it was Piet Wiersma from the Netherlands who emerged victorious, finishing in 5 hours and 25 minutes, just ahead of South Africa's Dan Moselakwe. Elsewhere, there's soccer action with Liberia securing a crucial 1-0 victory over Sao Tome in Group H of their World Cup qualifier. Meanwhile, the Congolese beat Togo 1-0 in Kinshasa, while Djibouti gained their first point in Group A with a 1-1 draw with neighbours Ethiopia. Elsewhere, Wales suffered a demoralising friendly 4-0. They were thrashed by Slovakia. Cricket action, Akil Hussain claimed 5 wickets for just 11 runs as the West Indies blew away Uganda to win by 134 runs in the ICC T20 World Cup in Guyana, with West Indies put on 173 for 5 in their 20 overs, with some contributions from Johnson Charles and Andre Russell. Here's Akil Hussain.
To be honest, I'm quite happy with the performance. As we've been seeing so far in the tournament, no one is to be taken lightly. They've all been performing well. Yes, it's not the strongest outfit, but today I thought I judged my spell mainly on the lengths that I bowl, and I know once I execute those lengths, it'll be tough for most batsmen to play. It's very good, very pleasing with the support behind us. We know it's a home World Cup for us, and we're very thankful for the support that is driving us in this tournament.
More cricket with the Indian cricket team. They had an incredible turnaround, beating arch rivals Pakistan by 6 runs in their second ICC Men's T20 World Cup that took place in New York. Set into bat by Pakistan, India struggled. They were bundled out for just 118 in 19 overs, so chasing a low total. Pakistan, however, just couldn't. They were restricted. And, of course, this is India. A wonderful defense from them. Finally, as well, we have some news from tennis, and it's Carlos Alcaraz. He won the French Open title, beating the fourth seed Alexander Zverev 6-2, 2-6, 5-7, 6-1, 6-2 on the Roland Garros clay. That's a wrap of your sport. We'll have more top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. A lot more to come. We'll talk about shampoo in the next half hour. There's been a recall for a particular kind of shampoo. More on coalitions to you. The SFM leading the conversation. It's Monday morning at 6:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, lawyers for the Umkhonto weSizwe party have sent a letter of demand to the Secretary of Parliament, Xolile George, and the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, asking both officers to refrain from convening the first sitting of Parliament. A 52-year-old man from Allenridge in the Free State is expected to appear in court today for allegedly raping and impregnating his 14-year-old niece. And the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, is embarking on another tour of the Middle East in an effort to boost support for a ceasefire in Gaza. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's a busy one into Pretoria this morning. Got the usual backlog on the Mopani Highway, which is already pushing back towards Bremer Street. And then Eski and Pathledi through Marubastad. That's really busy for this time of morning. And the N4, the Emelafeni Highway, already busy and queuing from Watermeer Street down towards the N1 Highway. Joburg, things building, no major problems, but you can just see on the systems we monitor that there's more traffic in the mix. It's getting busy in all the usual places, but just the usual congestion at this stage. Durban's N2 South already queuing through Mgeta Road towards Spaghetti Junction. Quite a backlog coming out of Kumashu this morning in the Bestas area on the Kumashu Highway. So big queues as you sort of leave and head down towards the Dust Road area, if you like. And Cape Town, fairly busy. The N2 queuing up passing Khayelitsha inbound towards the R300. It gets heavier from the airport through towards Mowbray Main. So indications are that it is going to be a busy Monday around Cape Town. The N1 inbound from Belleville through towards the Sable Road exit and onto the Cooper Interchange already busy as well. We just had a look at Mpumalanga. It was really heavily misted yesterday around the Emelafeni area. Better as we go back to work this morning. No signs of any mist and no signs of any delays. N12, N4 routes seem to be open and flowing normally. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
And Taulengla Chele, good morning.
Morning, Stephen. I hope you're well.
Well, it's a Monday. Intaling, let's just leave it there. How are the markets this morning?
Well, before we look at how markets are performing today, let's recap on last week's close. In Wall Street, stocks took a breather, slipping into the red on the back of the disappointing jobs print. Now, sentiment is quite different in Asia as stocks are pretty mixed. Traders, though, are also reacting to data showing much stronger than expected U.S. job growth in May and an unexpected uptick in the unemployment rate. That data faded hopes of a rate cut by the U.S. Fed in September. Back at home, the JSE closed in the red, with the all-share losing 0.35%. The rand, in the meantime, still range-bound, trading between 1880 and 1890, digesting all those local political concerns as well as a stronger dollar. It's currently trading at 1888 against the greenback.
And then U.S. employment expanding more than expected in May.
Yes, Stephen, the U.S. jobs numbers have surprised to the downside, rising higher than expected to 272,000, whereas analysts pegged in growth of 185,000. Now, further details of the jobs print showed that the unemployment rate edged higher to 4% from 3.9%, while the labor force participation rate declined to 62.5% from 62.7%. Now, on the surface, things look good and the numbers aren't bad. However, a strong labor market means that we might see a delay when it comes to rate cuts. Now, the print also comes as a surprise because initially last week we saw job reports including the ADP and the job openings print, which came in softer than expected and then boosted sentiment. But now it seems like things are changing, and analysts are now eyeing the Fed's meeting, which is scheduled to start this week, tomorrow, for further insight on the trajectory of monetary policy in the US.
And then lenders have loosened some of the borrowing restrictions for Sibanye.
So it seems like Sibanye has received some reprieve. That's as lenders of its revolving credit facilities have agreed to raise the covenant limits, allowing the miner to carry more debt. Now, Sibanye had initially asked its laborers for a temporary increase following a decline in its first quarter earnings. The decline was mainly due to structural issues, including power constraints, a backlog at the ports, and lower PGM prices. With such difficulties, Sibanye-Stillwater was less liquid, and so lenders have agreed to let the company carry more debt without violating loan agreements or incurring penalties, basically easing its financial pressures. Now, the lenders comprise of 11 international banks and 4 local banks.
Ntaling Lachela, thank you very much indeed. Back, of course, in an hour. More business news through the day here on SFM.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Advocate Sipho Mantula, good morning. In Accra, masses of Ghanaians and celebrities flooding the streets. What was the protest about?
Stephen, the protest was about the power outages that are affecting their businesses and their daily lives. And as you know, that once we have celebrities leading this march, there's something concerning. And this was led by a Ghanaian actress and a film producer, Yvonne Nelson. They are raising this issue, Stephen. We know that Ghana was one of the first African countries to advance in terms of electrification since the 60s. But now in the late 21st century, we see Ghana now experiencing this power cuts that we saw people going on the street over this weekend, coming up with a word like no light, no progress. Electricity is a right, not a privilege. These are the challenges that are facing West Africa, as well as East Africa, Stephen, and Southern Africa. The issue of power cuts and the issue of power supply in the continent is a serious concern for many governments in terms of economic growth.
And then in Haiti, the new Prime Minister, Gary Conille, hospitalized. What happened?
Stephen, he was hospitalized because he just came back. Others are saying it was a week of intense activities. But even if the Prime Minister's office in Haiti was so mum to can give us more details about the sickness or the medical condition of the newly elected or selected Prime Minister Gary Conille. Now, as you know, Haiti is trying to reboot its system in terms of governance. But now when the Prime Minister now is sick, Stephen, it's a concern for many political parties or for many groups in Haiti with the sickness of the Prime Minister, but he has returned in Haiti coming from the international trips.
And then Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa, he says that Russia's leader Vladimir Putin is my dear friend and ally.
Stephen, he says so because he was at the St. Petersburg on the International Economic Forum. He's raising those issues of being close to Putin, saying that Putin was able to defend the independence and the territorial integrity of Russia. We know how Kremlin, Stephen, has been moving towards pursuing the Sahel region, and now we see from the SADC region, Zimbabwe coming out clear, and as well as Mnangagwa raising the issues of the sanctions that have been hitting Zimbabwe, but at the same time, Russia assisting Zimbabwe in many activities. Hence, I say to you, Stephen, it was the International Economic Forum. It was important for Mnangagwa to raise the issues of economic opportunities for both Moscow and Harare.
And then in Malawi, there have been negotiations with government over this healthcare strike, but it looks like the sit-in is starting today.
That strike it is starting today, led by the National Organization of Nurses and the Midwives of Malawi, as well as the Physician Assistants Union of Malawi. Stephen, they've been raising this concern. They've been sitting with government, engaging on the increase on their grievances with government, and not only increases of their allowances, but they look at their working conditions. Hence, it appears that their engagement with government has failed, and also they try to engage with the Attorney General to intervene on this matter, but nothing yielded. Hence today, Lilongwe, Blantyre, it will be a nationwide strike of the what we call the health workers as well as the nurses.
And then in our archives, the 10th of June, 1990.
Stephen, I'm taking our listeners back to 34 years ago when Dr. Zenzile Mire Makeba, Mama Africa, returned to South Africa after pursued by the late President Nelson Mandela to come home. We know Mama Africa left the country in 1959, Stephen, only for 3 months, but it became 3 months for 30 years. And when she was coming back, she said that I will believe it when I'm sitting on the plane. And this was from a telephonic interview that he did from Belgium in Brussels, where she was living by then. Coming back home on this day, Stephen, it was important for also our historical archive as we are looking back at 30 years of our freedom and democracy. Asante sana SG, as we are still leading the conversation, SAFM observing the Soweto Uprising Month.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you so much. Back, of course, tomorrow. More news from our continent through the day here on SAFM. 20 minutes now to 7 o'clock.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Calls coming through this morning, voice notes too. Khulasani on the line from Limpopo. Hi, I'm Konto Wesizwe. Their statement overnight. Go for it.
Thanks for taking my call. I am puzzled by the stance that the MK is taking since the elections. Firstly, they wanted the IEC to hold the pronunciation on the election. And to my lame thinking, I thought they should have done it via interdict.
Yeah.
And currently, they are going again the same route, taking the letter from their lawyer to the parliament, which, for me, in my understanding, had they gone to the court and seek an interdict, that would be a proper way, legal way to do the thing. But for now, it's just showing how the kind of thinking in the leadership of the MK, they are not having an interest on South Africa and the development of the country. I think their thinking is very narrow, and they are not being considerate for the rest of the people who have voted in this election. Yeah. They promised us that they will challenge the IEC. I'm yet to hear of any court application that they have done so far. For me, I'm a bit puzzled by the stand that they're taking.
Yeah, Khulasani, look, I put it to their spokesperson last week about the evidence, and then we can't have, the system is designed that there are various points at which you can intervene, and they have the ability, if they want to, they can make those points in court. So I suppose we'll have to see what happens.
Thank you, sir.
Khulasani in Limpopo, thank you. Zig in Randburg. Hello, Zig. Been a long time. Good morning.
Good morning. We are in big trouble because a serious number of the parliamentarians, which we just elected, are not going to be able to swear an oath of office to uphold the constitution of Nelson Mandela's Rainbow Republic, because they are the very people who insurrected against it and against our highest court 2 or 3 years ago in favor of Jacob Zupta. Unfortunately, he can't serve as president, but he damn well tried, didn't he?
Well, I suppose. All right, Zig, thank you. Yeah, look, I mean, people can pledge to uphold the Constitution and vote to change the Constitution at the same time. Got to be done peacefully, though. Of course, as you know, MK says they don't want a Constitution at all, so that does maybe change things a little bit. 17 minutes to 7.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Well, the National Consumer Commission says it's recalling a particular shampoo product. It's the Dark and Lovely Moisture Plus shampoo. It's distributed in a 50 milliliter container. So it's a very small bottle, a single-use bottle really, that's being recalled here. Prudence Moyla is the head of complaints and investigations at the National Consumer Commission. Prudence, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning to your listeners.
Why is this product being recalled? What's wrong with it?
The product, actually, what is wrong is the shampoo that is in the kit. What L'Oreal has informed us on Wednesday when we had a meeting with them is that they have found traces of bacteria in the shampoo, which renders it unsafe to use. So that is why, in terms of the law, in terms of Section 60, they have to recall the product.
So they came to you, right? They discovered the problem.
Correct.
Okay. And how does it work from here? Do you oversee it? Do they just recall it themselves and you kind of watch the process, or do you recall it too? Is there an official sort of way in which this happens?
Yes, the reason why the Commission is also communicating is that we want to ensure that the product is brought back and that consumers stop using the product. But the recall in terms of Section 60 is done by them. In terms of the law, we can institute a recall, but in this regard, the law also allows that they can institute a recall. Every supplier who sells goods in South African markets has an obligation to run tests on an ongoing basis. In the event you pick up that there is a product failure or issues of safety in your product, you have an obligation to recall the product and notify the Commission.
Okay. Do you know, I mean, they talk about a bacteria. I mean, how dangerous is it? I mean, clearly it's not in compliance with the law, but is it really a big risk?
Yeah, from the discussions that we had, they said that they were still running tests to determine the type of bacteria that it is. But because it's still initial days and they're still running tests, we discovered from the discussion that obviously it would affect the people with compromised immune systems because it's a bacteria, and it might, result in some sort of hair loss or some other complications. But so far, we are waiting for them to give us the test results regarding the type of bacteria it is, so that we can properly communicate what the risks are that are involved.
So it's the Dark and Lovely Moisture Plus shampoo in the 50 milliliter container. It was sold at a specific time. It's not all of it.
Yeah, no, what we decided when we had the discussion is that because the product, when we usually look at the batch numbers, it's quite confusing for consumers. So we've decided that they do the recall of all the products. It comes in a packet. It's a kit. So it comes with a relaxer, a neutralizing shampoo that's the one that is affected by the bacteria. So usually the people who use it will understand it comes with a relaxer and a shampoo in it, which means consumers can then use it at home. So it comes in a purplish box. It's the regular one, the Super Moisture, and the anti-breakage one. So it's 3 products, but they look very similar. The Dark and Lovely Relaxer Kit. It comes in a box, but then in the box, there is that shampoo that is affected by the bacteria.
Do you know how many were sold?
So far, because we've said all products must come back, it does look like, from the numbers that they informed us, I think it was around They said about 150,000 products, if I'm not mistaken, but it can be more because we're saying recall all the products. And so far, we've also agreed that they must stop the sale up until the new safety precautions have been taken. Once they discover what bacteria is affecting the product, number one. Number two, where exactly it came from, then they can start production. So far, all the products that are in that purplish box that have the kit, the Dark and Lovely kit that has the neutralizing shampoo as well as the relaxer, we are asking consumers to return all of them. So long as you have that type of product, please return that product.
Thank you very much indeed, Prudence Moiwa. Really do appreciate the time. It's the 50 milliliter container as part of a kit, as you've heard, of the Dark and Lovely Moisture Plus shampoo. It comes with a relaxer as well, so it's a small bottle, but you can understand the problems there. Prudence Moiwa is the head of complaints and investigations at the National Consumer Commission. 12 minutes to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Shonasani and Santon. Shonasani, hi, good morning. Umkhonto Wesizwe, your thoughts?
Steve Volvo, I listened to the interview that you conducted last week. I don't know whether it's the secretary or it's whatever of the MK.
And it was the spokesperson last week, yeah.
Yeah, there was no substance in whatever that he was saying, to an extent that he was even lambasting his own colleague that he is not that well conversant in English. And obviously, I think it was on Sakino, it was you, one of the guys that said they take the instructions direct.
From Jacob Zuma, yeah. So this was on the Friday after the elections at the Results Operations Centre. We were speaking to the Secretary General. He said that every decision was made by Jacob Zuma. The spokesperson in Tlamulo Ndlele told us last week that wasn't the case, and I asked him if he was overruling his Secretary General. I think that's my memory of it, Shonasani, anyway. Yeah.
Yes, and here's the case now. If he was not that conversant in English and he was tainting the reputation of the organization, there and there, they should have corrected it. They should have They would have called a press conference and say, no. These are not the stance of the organization. The only thing I'm seeing is people trying to cause disorder in the country unnecessarily so, for the purpose of whoever that has their own personal agenda. And we're not going to be used as a vehicle to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
So whatever they're trying to do, I'm just saying to the country as a whole, please wake up and smell the coffee. It's not worth it, because if any of the things happen, I don't think that the former president's family will get affected. But it's just the poor family out there who's going to lose a father, a mother, a child, unnecessarily so. Because people are just trying to cause disorder.
All right, no, Shonasani on the line from Santon. Thank you. Interesting view. I mean, expect views on something like this. You know the number 086 000 2032, 9 minutes to 7.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Pretty busy into Pretoria this morning. The N4 route, just coming in from the Watermeyer exit down towards the N1 highway. It's an unusually heavy backlog for this time on a Monday morning. There's also been a crash driving into Joburg on the N12, just approaching Benoni's Tom Jones Street. Motorists arriving in from Delma, Sitwatwa, Davyton. Quite a heavy backlog that's pushing back towards Pitfontein. That is a big volume of traffic on that route this morning, and driving into that crash between Snake Road and Tom Jones. Also a collision on the side of the N3 North before Giluli's interchange. Traffic coming out of Alberton and Germiston backlogging again this morning. Durban's N3, Petermaritzburg to Durban, either way looking okay. Nightmare yesterday, but this morning it's all normal services restored there. No breakdowns, no crashes, which is good news. The Kwamashu Highway, heavy leaving Kwamashu, big backlogs down towards the Bestas area. Cape Town, if you're leaving Mitchell's Plain, it's quite heavy. The M7, Jakes Cobell Drive has a crash at Philippi before Turfall Road, so that's quite heavy. Queues back over Govan and Becky Bridge, and the AZ Berman option through some traffic restrictions. Very heavy leaving Mitchell's Plain up towards the R300. The highways are getting busy around Cape Town. Noticeably, the M5 already under some pressure there from Ottery right through to Barclay Roads in the Maitland area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
8 minutes to 7. Good morning. The National Education Department says it will now implement a decision taken by the Council of Education Ministers to no longer prioritise teaching jobs for people who've received the department's Funza Lushaka bursary. Under the scheme, the department used to give a bursary to people who wanted to study teaching. They would then be expected to teach in remote areas. In other words, people would get the bursary and then they would get a job. However, people who funded their own study said they were being discriminated against. So they say people who used the scheme had both been helped to study and get their first job. People who had paid for their own education to become teachers got no help at all. Elijah Mhlanga is the spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education. Elijah, good morning.
Stephen, good morning. Thank you so much for having us.
So why has the council decided to cancel prioritising people on this bursary scheme?
Well, Stephen, is to level the playing fields because over the years, as part of the conditions of the Funza Lushaka bursary scheme, we assisted our graduates to be placed in schools after they have graduated. But we then got representations from those who had used their own funding and those who had obtained bursaries from other places, including from the provincial education departments, that they too deserved a similar opportunity to get their first employment. And this matter has been discussed, and it was finally decided that we needed to see everyone in the same way.
So are you still funding students? Is the scheme still operating in some way? People are still being helped to study?
Yeah, absolutely. The Funza Lushaka bursary scheme remains in place, and it is an important intervention that has been in place for some time in terms of recruitment of teachers. So it's a conditional bursary. You get it because you agree that you will go and teach in those areas of need that have been identified by the department, and those are foundation phase, teaching in African languages, as well as technology subjects. So you agree to that, and then you are given the funding so that you are able to graduate, and when you're done, the practice had been that would then assist you to be placed in a school.
Okay, so Elijah, one of the problems, as I understand it, is that you were not able to accommodate all of the new teachers coming through. So the complaint from people who paid for their own education was that they had paid for their own education and now there wasn't a space for them in the education department. So what's happening now, as I understand it, and I realize this was with a very good motivation, okay, the intention was good, but what's happening now is that you're paying for people to study and you are not getting anything in return. They study, they qualify, but you have, from what I can see, more than enough teachers for the positions, because if you didn't have more than enough teachers, you wouldn't have had these complaints from other teachers. So is it really still worth actually running the bursary scheme at all? Are you getting any benefit from it?
Yeah, Steve. Yes, there's a benefit because the department, when it makes its own assessment in terms of the areas of need in the system, we have to redirect the qualified persons or the students to particular areas. Remember, those who self-fund, they study whatever that they want. They may be studying to teach at secondary school, subject of their own choice. But if you are studying through the bursary of the department, you are going to study that which we require you to study, because we always say that there are areas of shortage such as maths teachers. So we will expect you to be graduating to go and teach mathematics. That's why I said it's a conditional bursary. So it's still important. We'll still continue with it because we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where there's an oversupply of teachers in a particular area if we can do something to balance the scales.
Okay, I understand that you would need to balance things and that so what you're saying then is that there is still a demand in certain cases for you to be able to help people who you can then they then have an obligation to go and work in a remote area and in particular languages. So you're saying there's still a need for that. In other words, the people who come through the system who pay for their own education are not filling that need.
Yes, Stephen. That's why sometimes we say there's a shortage of teachers and we come back and correct it and say there's no shortage of teachers, but it's just that there's an oversupply in one area and in another place we find that we don't have teachers. So we are going to run the bursary to try correct that. But we also need to indicate that the increase in the number of, in the number of those that are qualifying is happening at the same time as the reduction in the budget. That's why provinces are not able to employ all the teachers. But we hope that as things go, we'll be able to employ them. And we sympathize with those teachers who are unemployed and yet they're qualified, because we do get complaints from them from all provinces saying that they've been looking for employment for some time and they're not able to find a job. It's simply because of budgetary constraints.
Elijah Mhlanga, thank you. Spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education. 2 minutes now to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Prophet OJ on the line from Mahakeng. Prophet OJ, been a long time. Good morning. The Government of National Unity, do you support the idea?
It has been a long time. I've been trying and I'm not been succeeding to go through. Steve, I'm concerned. It would seem like our political arrangement at the moment, we must watch that, there are two interests here. There's a public interest and business interest in every deal that is being proposed or looked into. I'm just wondering if in the whole negotiations we have people strong enough who are standing for public interest. I know we need investors. I know we need to police the market so that we develop economically. But we must be very, very careful not to find the business going away with the whole deal at the end at the public service, because we satisfied the market more than satisfied the public of South Africa.
Yeah. Prophet, it's actually quite a difficult thing. I mean, I think to ignore the markets, ask Liz Truss, ask the British what happened when their Prime Minister briefly ignored the markets. On the other hand, I mean, you can't just say, well, the business and the markets get to decide. People voted, full stop. And the vote must matter, must count, must probably be the most important thing.
Balance of the equation.
Yeah, if it's possible. Prophet OJ, thank you. On the line from Mahakeng. I do appreciate it. You were there, SAFM, leading the conversation. We'll have a lot more for you on the situation around coalitions. We'll talk also around the court case involving Zandile Gumede. There's a lot happening in that case at the moment. You were there, SAFM, leading the conversation at 7 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 30754. Now that's good news.
In our top stories, MK Party's bid to halt Parliament's first sitting and Blinken on Middle East tour to rally support for a Gaza ceasefire. Good morning. Lawyers for the Umkhonto weSizwe Party have sent a letter of demand to the Secretary of Parliament, Xolile George, and the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, asking both officers to refrain from convening the first sitting of Parliament. MK Party lawyers have told SABC News that failure to comply with the letter of demand would result in court action. Kenny Mapanga reports.
This demand comes after the IEC officially handed over lists of members of Parliament and provincial legislatures to the Chief Justice, who handed them over to the Secretary of Parliament, paving the way for the swearing-in of members soon. The MK Party has had a number of grievances since the results were declared by the IEC, with the party contending that they need to be resolved prior to the first sitting of Parliament.
Meanwhile, some political parties will be reporting back on their coalition talks today. The IFP's NEC will receive a report back from its coalition task team, while the DA's federal executive is expected to brief the party's federal council on its coalition talks with the ANC. The party's national spokesperson, Soli Malatsi, says they should know their position by later today.
The party's Federal Council, which is the senior decision-making body of the DA in between congresses, will convene on Monday, where it will, among other things, be briefed by our negotiating team on the status of the negotiations with the ANC and other parties. To this end, there will then be a discussion by the Federal Council on those negotiations, and will hopefully have an update that we will be in a position to communicate following the conclusion of the Federal Council.
A 52-year-old man from Allen Ridge in the Free State is expected to appear in court today for allegedly raping and impregnating his 14-year-old niece. Police spokesperson Stephen Takeng says the child arrived home on Friday and informed a mother that a teacher said she's pregnant. A case of statutory rape has been opened. The suspect will appear in the Orendalsrus Magistrates Court today. Traffic authorities in the Little Karoo says the Meyringspoort Pass linking Oudtshoorn to Beaufort West in the Central Karoo will remain closed until further notice due to extensive construction work. Significant repairs are underway, including the rebuilding of sections of the road as well as addressing hazardous ditches formed along the riverbanks. The Swartberg Pass also remains closed due to bad road conditions. These passes and other roads in and around Oudtshoorn were closed due to heavy rains which caused flooding and rockfalls last week. Mopping up operations will continue this week. Energy expert Professor Samson Mampueli says the mushrooming of informal settlements is one of the reasons why particular areas are excluded from receiving sufficient electricity supply. Mampueli told SABC News the current volume of electricity does not meet the growing demand. He says City Power Supply did not plan for the mushrooming of informal settlements when installing power supply infrastructure. City Power intends reintroducing load reduction as from today. Mampueli explains.
So what happens is that the distribution network is planned based on the projected demand. So when there's a new development, City Power would then go and do estimates of the electricity demand and then install a transformer to meet the demand for that particular new development with a little bit of a reserve to about 10%, sometimes 15%. So what we have seen is the mushrooming of informal settlements that then connect illegally in most cases to those transformers.
Further field, and finally, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is embarking on another tour of the Middle East in an effort to boost support for a ceasefire in Gaza. Blinken will first go to Egypt before moving on to Israel later today. It comes a day after the departure from Israel's war cabinet of a key figure. The BBC's Tom Bateman reports.
Last night's resignation of the former General Benny Gantz presents a further challenge to Mr. Netanyahu, with whom the White House has become exasperated over the course of the war. Mr. Gantz had become their preferred interlocutor, and some of his complaints about Mr. Netanyahu's leadership, including over the lack of a governance plan for a post-Hamas Gaza, closely mirrored those of the US administration. His move is likely to pull the centre of gravity in Israel's government back towards the far right, and so it is unclear how it will affect the pressure Washington can bring to bear on the Israeli Prime Minister.
Recapping the top story, lawyers for the Umkhonto weSizwe party have sent a letter of demand to the Secretary of Parliament, Xolile George, and the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, asking both officers to refrain from convening the first sitting of Parliament. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
And thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 30754 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. Do you think you're paying too much on your car insurance? 56-year-old Dialan said no to sky-high insurance premiums. He's now insured with Outsurance and only pays 756 Rand a month to insure his white 2023 Haval Jolion S. To follow in Dialan's footsteps, simply SMS out to 30754 for a quote. That's out to 30754. Licensed insurer and FSP, T's and C's online.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM sports headlines, it's cricket action today with the Proteas captain Aiden Markram preparing for a tough clash against Bangladesh, looking to secure a Super 8 spot, and athletics Gerda Steyn shattering her record with a third Comrades Marathon victory. We'll bring you details just before 7:30.
SAFM. guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
If you backlog into Benoni this morning, motorists driving in from Davey to Norotwatwa stuck in a queue from Putfontein through Snake Road down towards a crash scene just by Tom Jones. It doesn't look such a big crash scene, but I tell you, there is a lot of volume on that N12 Joburg bound getting held up there. A collision before Galuli's a little bit earlier. The N3 stays heavy from Germiston and Alberton, clogged into Elance and then all the way up through Germiston into that Bedfordview area. Durban, a lot of localised congestion this morning. The Higginson Highway's heavy out towards the N2, the Mike 1 Richmond Road out of Marion Hill. Big queues through to Westmead and up towards the N3 if you're routing up in towards Pinetown territory. And the Kwamashu Highway still badly backed up at Besters, leaving Kwamashu heading through towards the N2 highway. Cape Town, no major incidents, all fairly busy though. The highway is jamming from Belleville along the N1 right through to Kuburg Interchange. That's pretty heavy this morning. M5 now bottlenecking and queuing from Ottery right through to Kuburg Interchange. And some traffic lights out in the Brackenfell area. This is causing chaos. De Bron and Brackenfell Boulevard. It is backed and stacked all approaches. Might be a good junction to avoid. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
8 minutes after 7, good morning with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Congratulations again to Gerda Steyn, breaking her own record in the uprun in the Comrades Marathon yesterday. Just an incredible performance. Well, we'll talk politics, of course. We'll find out a little bit more about the case involving Zandile Gumede, but there's a lot more to it than that. And some of the developments there that I think maybe we've sort of missed over the last few weeks because we've all been focusing on the elections. Various political parties saying different things about coalition discussions, and I suspect it's going to be a sort of day of press conferences. You heard Anne Musa in her diary earlier. We're expecting, I think we'll get public comments in some way from the DA, the IFP, the EFF, maybe even the ANC, who knows, on the coalition negotiations. Kind of a week from now, we do need to know where we are. Things get a bit sticky there. You've heard Umkhonto weSizwe as well, saying they don't want Parliament to actually meet. They say they have evidence of vote rigging, but as you know, as we heard last week, they haven't presented any of that evidence and still haven't detailed any of that evidence. We'll hear from Rise Mzansi, one of the parties, one of the newcomers. They won just 2 seats. We'll hear from them in the next half hour as well. Good morning, 9 minutes after 7.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, the focus of politicians over the last few weeks has been on our elections and the formation of a coalition government of some kind. There's been a series of developments in eThekwini involving the former ANC mayor there, Zandile Gumede, and the case against her, which involves corruption, involves a series of other people and a series of connected cases. A forensic investigator who was contracted to probe the claims against Gumede and is also investigating cases involving Umgeni Utukela Water has now said under oath that his company is not being paid to try and sabotage the corruption cases against certain politicians in eThekwini. And know how important the story has been over the years. Sam Souls, a journalist and managing partner at the Amabungani Centre for Investigative Journalism, been looking at this. Sam, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Yes, good morning, Stephen.
So we know Zandile Gumede and others face serious charges relating to tenders in eThekwini. There are other cases that in that part of the country that have been investigated. The cases have been moving very slowly. There's a company called Integrity Forensic Solutions, which has probed some of these claims. Now, their investigator, Leo Saunders, is making certain claims under oath. What exactly is he saying?
Look, he's saying two things. He's saying in the case of eThekwini and another case that his company was investigating involving Utukela Umgeni Water, that they had legally binding, in his view, agreements for those entities to contract with IFS, the investigating firm, to probe allegations and then further to bring those to a court-ready state and support the police and prosecution service right throughout that period. And he's saying that once they've done that and they've got suspects in front of the court, what he alleges is for political reasons, to protect the accused, those entities are then suddenly cutting off the money to continue funding his services and placing those cases, and in particular the high profile one with Zandile Gumede, placing those cases in jeopardy. He's also making allegations about the mismanagement of at least the Gumede case by the NPA.
The decisions around this contract, what he says are the sabotage, how have they actually been made? I mean, has the contract actually already been cancelled? Is it being weakened in some way? Who's been making those decisions?
Yes, in both cases, the contracts have been cancelled. In the case of eThekwini, it's been the acting head of the city's investigation and integrity unit, who didn't even write to Mr. Saunders and his company, basically just informed the Hawks that the city was no longer prepared to fund this case. And similarly, in the case of the Water Authority, the acting CEO basically just unilaterally terminated that contract. And Saunders has actually gone to court to challenge these decisions. There are arguments why the municipality, at least in their case, maybe had a case to say, well, why should we continue funding? But they have really dragged their feet on responding to Saunders' case, which really supports his contention that this is a politically motivated decision. It's got nothing to do with the quality of his work or the legality of his contracts.
So if his company is no longer contracted to do these investigations, does it all just stop? I mean, the evidence that they've amassed so far, I presumed, would have to be entered into the court cases. I mean, would that process stop? Would it not actually hold weight anymore?
Well, look, it certainly would potentially jeopardize the case. He is the main expert witness. We've seen this again in complex organized crime cases. The forensic investigation is outsourced to a company like IFS or PwC, and then those entities come and take the court through the detailed evidence. And normally that's on a contractual basis. Those people are paid for their services. So the fact that this money has been cut off does jeopardize that process. The NPA has now stepped in to try to negotiate a deal where it takes over the payments to Mr. Saunders, but that process has also been fraught with obstacles.
It's quite a weird situation. So you have a former mayor who faces certain charges, a company working for the metro that the mayor used to lead, and now someone is cancelling the contract. I mean, if you just look at it, never mind the names, this was always going to be problematic, wasn't it? I mean, a former mayor is always going to have some sort of residual political influence. We know Gumede is a person of political influence. So it's quite a strange situation that has developed in this way.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's essentially Saunders' case. We know that the RET faction, or perhaps we should now call it the Zuma faction of the ANC, retained control of eThekwini municipality, and Zandile Gumede was definitely part of that faction, and it may be we are seeing that faction exerting its influence now to protect her in some way. We don't know. The problem is eThekwini has not up to now answered questions and responded to the claims.
If the case against Gumede collapses, and the other cases collapse, I mean, I presume there'll be nothing to stop her from coming back into formal politics, become the mayor of eThekwini again, who knows?
Absolutely. And we've seen that even the ANC, has tried to use her in the elections, despite this, cloud hanging over her head. And this would obviously pave the way for her return, especially given the dominance of MK in KwaZulu-Natal.
Would there be any other way around this? So we'll have to see what happens in the court cases. But either way, just the fact that there's a court case could weaken the prosecution in some way.
Absolutely. The defense in that matter has already raised the issue of the legality of this investigation and obviously the evidence flowing from it. And what is of concern is the kind of inept way that the NPA has responded to this challenge, which was in fact foreseeable.
Surely the NPA has an interest in making sure there's justice done here, or at the very least a proper prosecution.
Absolutely. But what Saunders is saying is that there are indications either of reluctance or of incompetence in terms of dealing with the situation, funding the continued provision of service, and he has specific complaints in the UUW matter about the conduct of the prosecutor in that matter, who he alleges has messed up the indictment. In fact, he said he was at the last minute asked to draw up the final indictment, and then there was a bizarre process whereby, according to him, a much weaker version was entered into the court record.
Sam Soul, thank you, journalist and managing partner at the Amabungani Centre for Investigative Journalism. 17 minutes after 7.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, I think it's going to be a very important political week. The Constitution says that by this time next week, the National Assembly must have met and elected a Speaker and a Deputy Speaker and a President. Overnight, Mkhonto weSizwe said it would go to court to stop Parliament from meeting, claiming it wants its case, alleging that the election was rigged to be heard first. As you know, MK has given no evidence for its claims. On Friday last week, we heard from the MK spokesperson, Nhlomulo Ndlela, who said they would only produce that evidence in court. They have not, insofar as I know, presented that evidence, in fact, in any forum. Meanwhile, political parties are holding meetings and negotiations. From what I can see, the ANC says it wants to form a government of national unity. The DA says it would join, subject to certain conditions. The EFF says it might work with the ANC, but won't work with the DA and the Freedom Front Plus. MK says it's meeting with the ANC, but also has conditions. The Patriotic Alliance says they're also having talks with the ANC. You heard Anne Moussa's diary an hour ago in which she suggested that, in fact, quite a few of these parties, including the IFP, will have important meetings today, and some of them may well speak in public about their positions. Well, one political party which is prepared to speak at the moment about what is happening is the new political party Rise Mzansi. They won 2 seats in the elections. Their chief organizer is Makashule Ghana. Makashule, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to the SFM listeners.
Are you having talks with the ANC at the moment?
We are having talks not only with the ANC, but we are also reaching out to other political parties. Of interest to us as Rise Mzansi is to ensure that there's no paralysis. The first sitting of the National Assembly needs to elect the Speaker, needs to elect the Deputy Speaker, and needs to elect the President, so that the work of the legislature and the work of government continues. We fully understand that there will be other issues that will not be fully agreed to. But one of the things that we need to ensure is that the first sitting of the National Assembly elects the people as per the Constitution and restore the confidence of the institutions of the state to continue as the other conversations are happening.
Do you have any particular conditions that you're attaching to this?
The key principles for us is around upholding the Constitution and the rule of law, ensuring that the public service continues. Teachers must go to school to teach, nurses must attend to those that are sick, and other aspects of the public service that should not be disrupted as the conversations are ongoing, and there should not be any instability in how the lives of South Africans are going. So those are the things that we are looking at. But obviously, as we have to get into the conversations themselves, there will be some specific issues that will then table.
Are there any positions in Cabinet or Parliament that you want?
At this stage, we haven't made to say that we want a position in the executive. Our interest at this stage is to ensure that the first sitting of the National Assembly results in a speaker, result in a deputy speaker, and result in a president being elected. We are not married to the idea of being in the executive at this stage.
Okay. I mean, it's one thing to say you want Parliament to meet for the first time and do its elections, but there's kind of almost no point if a president can be removed in a confidence vote 2 months from now. It might be better to solve all the problems first. I mean, do you really think it's a good idea just to have meetings about the first sitting of Parliament? Don't we need to do a bit more than that? And isn't that the problem?
So the Constitution is clear in terms of the time frame to form the government. What we should not allow is a situation wherein we enter the stage of paralysis because we haven't complied with the Constitution, because postponing and delaying the election of the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, and the President will go against the Constitution itself. And being a constitutional democracy, that is not something that we want to be part of.
There's a suggestion in a News 24 report this morning. It's primarily around the Democratic Alliance working with the ANC, but they suggest that there is a proposal that the position of finance minister, or the finance ministry, that the people who lead that are seen as sort of politically neutral. And one of the suggestions they make is that, in fact, your leader, Songezo Zibi, could be mentioned as a possible deputy minister of finance. Is that something you'd be open to?
That possibility has not been tabled with us. I'm hearing it for the first time. I haven't read the report that you are referring to. So no one has come to us with an idea around the deputy ministry for our leader Songezo. But obviously, it is also in our interest that the two extra positions that are not members of parliament, we need to ensure that it's not failed politicians that are brought through the back door to come back and be members of cabinet. We need to look broadly in society to ensure that the government that is put together does reflect the moment that we find ourselves in.
Okay. As Rise Mzansi Makashule, you spent a huge amount of money on your campaign. Over 15 million rand, I understand. You had more posters in some urban areas than other political parties did. You had what seemed to me to be quite a lot of attention from the English language media, and you got less than half of 1% of the vote. Just 2 seats. You must be very disappointed.
As Rise Mzansi, we are happy with the results that we received as a new entrant into the political space. We are going to represent the South Africans that have put their trust in us in Parliament to ensure that we contribute positively, given the moment that we find ourselves in, to ensure that South Africa is safe, South Africa is prosperous, is equal and more united, because there's always this temptation to divide South Africans. Ours is to unite South Africans, and we understand that the political environment that we contested in was not the usual one. We are happy with the return, and we are going to work for all South Africans going forward.
You're happy with 2 seats, 0.5%? Seriously, Makashule, come on.
Rise Mzansi is in Parliament. You will know, Stephen, earlier on when you had interviewed me, I had said that after the elections, Rise Mzansi will be in Parliament and Rise Mzansi will be in the legislature. So the results have given us seats in Parliament, have given us a seat in the legislature. We are going to work with the seats that we have to serve South Africans to the best of our ability.
What do you think you did wrong? Or let me put it differently. Let me be kinder to you. What do you think you'll do differently in the future, in the next election? We've got local government elections 18 months, 2 years from now, and another national election after that. Surely you would do things slightly differently, unless you think South Africa just isn't ready for your message, which would be an interesting comment.
We are going to work with our volunteers, our organizers, who for many of them, it was the first election. Now we have the experience. We know where we have support, where we do not have support. We are going to ensure that our resources are spent in a way that, with the knowledge that we didn't have before the election, to ensure that we get maximum returns. But I'm so happy with the experience that the team members at the national level, at the ward level, at the municipal level have gained. And I'm very much certain that come the next election, you'll see a greater representation of Rise Mzansi, because I believe the message of building a safe, prosperous, equal and united South Africa in one generation is a good message. The message of leading new leaders, especially given the environment that we are in, is still a message that we need to take to South Africa.
Okay, we've seen with small parties before what happens is someone comes along, starts a party, they get 1 or 2 seats and they decide not to go into Parliament. As I understand it, Songezo Zibi is going to take up one of your seats in Parliament. I presume also that your premier candidate is going to take a seat in the Gauteng legislature. Can you give us a commitment now that they'll serve a full term?
Songezo will be in Parliament, Vuyiswa will be in the Gauteng legislature, and I will join Songezo in Parliament.
For 5 years?
For 5 years, yes. The term is 5 years. We intend to serve the term and ensure that we build from the success that we have had in this election going into the 2026 and 2029 elections.
Makashule Ganap, thank you very much indeed. Chief Organizer for Rise Mzansi, 27 minutes after 7.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. We beat the Dutch on Saturday night. Mm-hmm. They won the Comrades. Now we play Bangladesh today.
And yes, you know it's going to be a cracker. Steve Markram and the boys ready to take on the Tigers in New York today. 4:30 is when the first ball will be bowled. It's an ICC T20 World Cup clash with the victory securing their spot in the Super 8. Captain Aiden Markram's team relying on their experience as well as strong bowling attack. Here's Aiden Markram.
You look at conditions. You look at a really strong Bangladesh team, and it's going to be a proper challenge for us. So naturally, looking forward to it. We've luckily had the privilege of playing 2 games now on the surface and at this venue. So hopefully, it can give us even clearer plans, and we can develop plans from a batting point of view how to get to a score of maybe about 140. And if we do bat first, and hopefully then our bowlers can do the rest.
Meanwhile, in soccer, Orlando Pirates striker Evidence Mahopa says the talks that he could be moving to Europe is flattering, but he remains contracted to the Soweto Giants. The 24-year-old was linked to several clubs abroad following his impressive performance for Bafana Bafana at AFCON 5 months ago. Here's Mahopa.
No, it cannot be a distraction. One thing I realized, it can push you, but you have to stay focused because I think... No, I'm still a Orlando Pirates player, so I have to stay focused on the team, prepare for next season because we'll be here.
Soccer action saw Senegal. They kept their unbeaten start to the 2026 World Cup qualification with a 1-0 win away at Mauritania, while Tunisia also stayed top of their group despite a goalless draw away against Namibia. Athletics had Steyn shattering her own record to win her 3rd Comrades Marathon, clocking an incredible 5 hours, 49 minutes and 46 seconds. Leading from start to finish, Steyn's pace left the competition far behind, with Alexandra Morozova and Courtney Olsen completing the podium. And we also had Piet Weersman from the Netherlands. He emerged victorious, finishing in 5 hours and 25 minutes, just ahead of South Africa's Dan Moselakwe. That's in the men's race. Motorsport, Max Verstappen returned to winning ways in a chaotic Canadian Grand Prix, navigating the on-off rain to secure his 6th win of the season. Lando Norris led twice but finished 2nd after a costly safety car period, while George Russell clinched 3rd despite several mistakes and a collision with Oscar Piastri. Lewis Hamilton finished 4th, his best result this year after an intense battle with his teammate. And cycling, Primož Roglič had to dig deep during a dramatic finish of the Criterium du Dauphiné to hang on and win his 2nd title in 3 years by 8 seconds. And in another road race in cycling, Lottie Kopecky has won the 2024 Women's Tour of Britain after leading the race from the first stage. That's a wrap of your sport. More top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. A lot more to come. We'll hear from the CEO of City Power about the load reduction in Joburg. You with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning, 7:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, mining unions are threatening to a joint full-blown strike at Sibanye Stillwater after workers were served with notices of termination for staging an underground sit-in last week over the employee share ownership scheme. Lawyers for the Umkhonto weSizwe party have sent a letter of demand to the Secretary of Parliament, Xolile George, and the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, asking both officers to refrain from convening the first sitting of Parliament. And President Emmanuel Macron has called a snap parliamentary vote in France after his alliance lost heavily to the far right in the European Union elections. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still slow out of Germiston and Alberton areas this morning on the run through to Galulis. You've got the left lane closure at Van Buren, which has been there forever, and then a crash on the side of the road as you come up to off-ramp into Galulis interchange. That's all a bit busy. The N12 out of Joburg, earlier crash at Benoni is being cleared, but there's a breakdown after Atlas Road, so that N12 towards Joburg stays heavy. And Oliphant's Fontaine Road through Midrand. Doesn't matter whether you're arriving from Clayville side or from Blue Hills. There's some really heavy traffic around the Pretoria Main Old Joburg Road junction this morning. The N14, that's looking quite slow as you get up towards Brockfontein Interchange. That's the Krugersdorp Highway, just after the R55. It all gets a bit busy through there. Pietermaritzburg to Durban, looking fine this morning. If you've turned around after running Comrades or doing Comrades yesterday, and it's your day to go back inland up the N3, that also looks clear as well. There's no major issues there. Durban, very busy on the N2 North, queuing up already through the M7, right through the Westwood Mall, into the roadworks. Komarshu Highway at Bestas stays busy as well. And Cape Town, really big, in fact, 3 really big traffic lights out this morning in busy commuting areas. Probably the biggest snarl up is De Bron and Brackenfell Boulevard. Those lights are down. That's very heavy all over that particular junction. Lights are also out Marine Drive at the harbour entrance. So as you come out of Milnerton, you're straight into traffic in that Pardon Island area. And right in the heart of Newlands, I guess it's Campground Road, Protea and Main Road. That junction's down. A lot of school traffic in that area as well, particularly those boarding schools going back after the weekend. So a lot of congestion there, particularly Campground Road and the Main Road going north through that junction in that central Newlands area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The Business Update on SAFM.
In Lechele, morning. How are the markets this morning?
Kicking things off in Asia, those stocks are a mixed bag. Traders on that end chewing on GDP numbers out from Japan. That economy has contracted less than expected, further providing some relief for traders and markets. With that, the Nikkei is trading higher, up 0.98%, and the Asia Dow gaining 0.42%. Over in the US, futures pretty flat. It's going to be a busy week for Wall Street traders as that stock market awaits CPI data and a Fed decision due on Wednesday. On the local front, market slipped into the red with the all-share closing 0.35% lower following downbeat global sentiment. Shifting focus to the local unit, the rand still pretty range-bound, sitting between 1880 and 1890. It's currently trading at 1887 against the dollar.
And the fashion group taking on the online retailers Shein and Temu.
So the Foschini Group online platform Bash has delivered double-digit growth with turnover jumping 44%. That's as it continues to gain market share in an extremely difficult market. Now, the clothing retailer further said it was not bothered by competition from Chinese platforms like Shein and Temu and US e-commerce giant Amazon, which recently launched in South Africa, and that it had been investing heavily into its online platform to prepare for such. Meanwhile, the group's overall results were pretty upbeat. Revenue increased by 8.9% to a record 60.1 billion rand, while cash generated from operations surged 76.5%. It said it would use these proceeds to repay its debt, pay dividends, and fund growth and acquisitions. Now, during the year, TFG restructured its store portfolio, opening 272 new outlets and revamping about 100 more. However, it closed 106 unprofitable stores. Now, Stephen, it will be interesting to see how it plans to execute its store rollout strategy, especially as its online platform continues to grow.
And then the economic week ahead, we're expecting numbers from the mining and manufacturing sectors.
So economists are expecting a bounce back in both manufacturing and mining industries after both sectors negatively contributed to the first quarter GDP print. And it seems like both industries are poised to grow in the second quarter due to the constant power supply. Now, let's start off with factory activity. The last manufacturing print surprised to the downside with activity slipping in March. But the Bureau for Economic Research is positive about April's performance, saying that the solid improvement in the April APSA PMI index boded well for the manufacturing production. And so economists expect production to jump 3.8% in April. On the mining front, Nedbank economists expect a recovery in mining output. It said the uptick would mainly be due to base effects and improvement in operating conditions. And so it's pegged growth for the sector at 1.1% in April.
Intaleng Lechele, thank you very much indeed. Intaleng, of course, back tomorrow. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Richard in Gqeberha, good morning. Zandile Gomede, you heard that conversation around the court case that's developing there.
Yes, Steve, good morning, man. I had the information. Look, at first, litigation in municipalities is an unfunded mandate. That's where we need. It's an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
That's where we need to start. But then the problem is with both the company and the municipality, right from the manner in which it was contracted. Because there are two ways to contract for investigation of that sort, is to ensure that your fee structure includes a possibility of you taking time to scan and provide expert with information in the court. And that can take 3 years. So your fee structure will take into account. Or in another case, you may simply your fee structure may simply be for somebody's with me here.
Yeah, Richard, okay, I presume you weren't driving the car. Please don't drive the car while you're talking to us. I'm not quite sure where Richard was going. Bonakele and Khayelitsha. It's not my morning this morning when Bonakele and Khayelitsha has put me on hold. Wow. Richard's gone off to go and deal with his car. Well, how's your Monday going? Good morning. 22 minutes.
On hold. Please wait.
We'll wait, Bonakele. Thank you. You're in Khayelitsha, 22 minutes to 8.
Mama Kitty, I heard Rand Water talking on the radio about how dangerous it is for people to encroach on their pipeline servitude.
Yes, those high-pressure Rand Water pipelines are under the ground distributing megaliters of water. When people build on top of the pipeline, Rand Water is unable to conduct maintenance on the pipeline, which has a negative impact on water provision. Pipelines can burst without warning. People could get seriously injured or worse.
Yes, people can die from a bursting pipe. That is why people need to understand that Rand Water servitude is where a Rand Water pipeline is located. If we build our houses or businesses on a Rand Water servitude, then we are encroaching on that servitude. They say if communities want to know whether they've encroached over servitudes, they should look for the Rand Water beacons.
The beacons indicate the presence of Rand Water pipelines under the ground. They're rectangular, made of concrete, are painted either white or blue, and have the Rand Water logo on them.
Let's take a walk around our area to see if there are any Rand Water beacons so that we can also tell the neighbors.
Rand Water, celebrating 120 years of existence and still finding new ways to provide clean, portable bulk water.
The Trellidor Ultimate Big Blue Sale is now on. Get amazing discounts on the best security South Africans trust. With over 50 franchises across the country, you can always find a security expert near you. So call 0861 Trellidor or visit trellidor.co.za today. Terms and conditions apply.
Am I left or right-brained? I'm leaning right. Right? However, I do have some left-brain tendencies. Perhaps I'm left-brained with right-brain tendencies. Am I overthinking this? I don't want to be caught underthinking it. Or maybe I'm overthinking about underthinking the overthinking. Which am I?
At RMB, the simple answer is both. When you need a thoughtful solution for financial complexity that doesn't make you choose, there are only 3 letters you need to know. RMB, a division of First Rand Bank Limited, an authorized FSP and registered credit provider.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
20 minutes to 8. Good morning. Well, as you know, there's been quite a bit of criticism of the Electoral Commission over its handling of the elections. There were long queues. It took a while to get the results. There were 3 ballots, of course. There have even been threats to go to court. MK says it believes the elections were rigged. It's provided no proof of its claims. Dr. Seisman Mutlung is a lecturer in political studies and international relations at Northwest University. Dr. Mutlung, good morning.
Hi, Stephen. Greetings to you and your listeners.
You seem to suggest the IEC actually did pretty well. How do you assess the IEC's handling of these elections?
I think generally how it did well was the extent that we have had complaints about stations that opened late, but we have come to an end where elections were counted roughly in an estimated time, and at the time of closing there weren't so many stations that remained open. So given the normal trends that IEC has been working, we see that it worked based on what it has estimated. It is only these inconveniences of the machines and other issues that political parties have raised of counting, which I think is something that now brings the IEC's credibility under the spotlight.
Well, I mean, these parties that make these claims, I mean, MK is the main one. How do you assess those claims? I mean, how should we look at claims like this? How do we deal with them?
Dealing with them first is if they were raised at the voting district voting station, let's use that, and then did the presiding officer at that station manage issues properly? And my suspicion is that at the voting district everything worked very well. It is only when the votes were sent to a local elections office, where they were to be captured. So the results that were captured on a result slip that were posted on the wall of that station versus those that were captured were not congruent. And if a political party raises a dispute on those results have to be checked back on the against the result slip, against the copy, and the IEC should resolve that quickly. And if the IEC did not resolve that, the question is why? Is it that the explanation must be given as to why the copy and the original slip differ, if or should not be captured correctly versus what is captured electronically? And that is where IEC has to be held more accountable for. Why does it deviate from the handwritten results? And if IEC had resolved those things, case closed. But if not, maybe how the MK party wants this to be done is maybe IEC to bring a public announcement as to how it resolved this, because IEC keeps saying we resolved them, and this is how I think they did. If there's anything different to that, it becomes a concern. That is why MK is justified to seek for accountability, which is something IEC prides itself of, that it is a responsive electoral management organization, and it has to respond to these concerns.
There's this sort of talk you hear. People say we should just have the elections again. I mean, I don't think that that's legal. It would cost a fortune, and I don't know if it would change the outcome.
I doubt it will change the outcome. In terms of being legal, it is something I'm not sure of. There has to be a massive discrepancy, I think, and the court should be the one to say you have to run the elections again, because there's enough evidence that you have tampered with the outcomes. What people voted for and what you captured on your electronic system is not the same. And if there's no valid reasons, that's what initially I said. If there's any valid reason to run again, that's the court, for the court to say. And then, yeah, it won't lead to the same outcome. We suspect MK might even lose more of this. And I don't know if people will go back to EFF, go back to ANC, because there are others who are regretting. The people that I've met, I won't mention parties, but they say I vote for party X, but its showing was bad. It didn't gain as much as I expected, and maybe they would think to vote for different parties. This will be an altogether new game. We cannot simulate a same response. It will be another surprise coming, and will other parties that lose from that feel it's fair? Let's say MK loses West. Will MK be happy with that and say, okay, this is what we called for? I think that will be bad, and people might not even go the second time. They will say, I've done now this mess. Really, I have no time for this. The voter turnout might even be lower than we experienced.
Are there things that the IEC should do differently next time around? I mean, every time you run an election, there'll be some kind of learning that comes from it. Are there obvious things that you think need to be done differently next time around?
What they could do differently was on voting, special vote 1 and 2, those days, we saw IEC going to fewer houses. Okay, those that I was observing, there were about 58 days. It needed more resources, but on the election day, there were older people 70, 80, and some people who were infirm who wanted to skip the queue, and the well-able people, especially young people, were grumbling over these people had an option of a special vote. Why are they here and they seek preference? And that was another issue that caused commotion in the queues. And I think IEC must make it, I don't know, mandatory or what, for all these people who are old and infirm to go vote on the special vote. So those 1 and 2 days are enough for them to go vote and be done. And then the third day is general for all. That is a very important thing to consider, to make sure that the queues are shorter and there is less frustration, because political agents capitalize on this. They exploit the vulnerable and want to put them up the queue and frustrate agents, and this really doesn't make for a good management of an election. Lastly, I've seen these voter management devices were not really functional. The IEC has to make a decision whether to get rid of them altogether or to look for something else. At the day of elections, I used my cell phone to check the ID numbers of some people who are voting, and we could identify they were supposed to vote here, but the VMD was not functioning. The other complication is that the VMD tells or give Mutlong 3 ballots or so forth. They qualify for 3 ballots. That information could be ingrained into a cell phone app. And then everyone could check for themselves. Before I leave my home, I can check where I vote, how many ballots I qualified for, have a screenshot of that. That could really make things easier. Otherwise, go the manual way, the old way. Let's see how it works, because that was the solution for the long queues eventually. And then we have now 3 ballots. It means more human resources are needed. IEC should hire more people, especially to rotate them. Stephen, you had people coming at about 4, 5 a.m. to the open stations, and they left the 5 a.m. the following day. That's like 24 hours at work. And want these people to be optimal, to be alert, not to make mistakes like a ballot paper is stamped. That's unreasonable. So IEC should rotate staff, maybe give them 6-hour shifts or whatever, but make sure staff are rotated to keep them fresh for the time of counting.
Dr. Seisman Mutlong, thank you very much indeed. Lecturer of Political Studies and International Relations at Northwest University.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very heavy this morning on the run in from the Vaal area. There's been a crash. It's it's between the Heidelberg Road, the 550, and the Klip River Drive exit. So motorists driving into Joburg from the Vaal from that Heidelberg Road, stuck in quite a heavy bind. The N3 stays really heavy out of Germiston Alberton this morning. The N12 N3 routes into Elands and then all the way past the roadworks at Van Buren and then past a crash just as you get on towards the N12 East exit. So very heavy backlogs there. Also, the Mike Run running north is heavy as well, from Gold Reef City right through almost to about Corlett Drive this morning. If you're on your way to Sandton, that's a heavy queue. And a breakdown on the N12 near Rondebolt Road, still slowing traffic coming through from Benoni. Queues from Snake Road through to about that Rondebolt Road exit. Pretoria easing up nicely. It was busy earlier, but things just starting to drop off. Durban side, the Higginson Highway coming out of Chatsworth, that's also eased nicely. The M4 Southern Freeway is queuing. Now, we've been warning about this. The problem on the Southern Freeway is the closure of Brook Street, which is the extension right at the sort of top end as you go into the CBD. So that closure there forces traffic off the highway and down sort of into the market area, and then a cutback on Dr. Pixley Kasumi. And that causes congestion, and that bottlenecks and goes right down almost to sort of Congella area on the M4. So if you don't come off at the Esplanade, you really get into a real traffic bind. The N3 Pavilion through to Sherwood looking quite heavy. Durban through to Pietermaritzburg and onwards back inland province is clear this morning. If today's the day where you drive back after Comrades, no major problems. And Cape Town, 3 really big traffic lights. You've got Brackenfell Boulevard and De Bron out. That's really heavily backed up. Marine Drive at the container or the harbour entrance in Pardon Island, those lights are out. So if you're coming through Pardon Island towards the N1 highway, very slow. And right in the heart of Newlands, it's the big junction of Main Road, Campground and Protea. No traffic lights there, and it's quite heavily congested in that part of town as well. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
at SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
9 minutes to 8. You may remember the problems with the driver's license card printing machine. There's only one machine that prints all of the driver's license cards in the country. It had a problem and no one could get a driver's license card for quite some time. Now there's, we're told, a new machine coming. But we know very little about where this new machine comes from. Leighton Beard, spokesperson at the AA. Leighton, good morning. We know under the law you have to have a driver's license card. Your license itself never actually expires. Do we know anything else about our brand new driver's license card printing machine?
Unfortunately, at this stage, all we know really is that a tender, we've seen the tender, it assures everybody that everything has been done transparently. But we know, for instance, that they are considering a machine from France. And what we've heard very recently is that the process of acquiring that machine is advanced. Now, exactly how advanced it is, we don't know. But certainly, I think for a lot of South Africans, the procurement of a machine is very important. Our big concern, and this is something we've raised very, very often in the past, is that we can't just be having one machine to service all the needs or to service the needs of all South Africans. We think that at least two machines is something that is necessary. But again, we don't know to what extent the procurement process has been finalized and when exactly all of this is going to be rolled out.
Isn't it all a bit 20th century to have to carry a driver's license card on you in the first place? I mean, surely it could be done electronically.
I think there are a lot of arguments that could be made for an electronic card. Obviously not everybody has access, to maybe, to having a smartphone that could have such a driving license card. I think in South Africa's sense, the fact that we do have cards is something that we need to live with. But if we are going to be using cards, I think it's incumbent upon government to ensure that they are delivered easily and people can get them very easily. And sadly, unfortunately, at the case, too many people still struggle to get those physical cards when they need them.
I mean, there was a time, certainly in my memory, when you didn't actually have to drive with your driver's license card on you in the first place. And I don't know if it's worth changing that. I'd imagine a police officer would want to see your card. But maybe it's time for a whole rethink.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are arguments for both sides. I mean, our view is that if you have a driving license card, it does, serve as a form of identification. Unfortunately, we know there are many of these cards that are forged, but that has to be factored into the production of those cards in the first place. But if people are going to be compelled to have cards, then government must make sure that these cards are tamper-proof, that people can get them very easily, and that their systems are in place to ensure that when people go and apply for these cards, they can get them quite easily. We have also obviously put on the table these proposals to have them extended, the validity period extended by 3 to 5 years. So in other words, your card isn't only valid for 5 years, but is valid for 8 or 10 years. Now, our understanding is that government was on board with that suggestion, and they thought it was a good suggestion. But we heard last week that suggestion wasn't even tabled at Cabinet. So I think there's still a lot of issues around the driving license card that needs to be ironed out, Stephen.
Leighton Beard, thank you, spokesperson for the AA.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Confirmation, Joburg City Power from this morning implementing what's called load reduction. They say there's too much pressure on their grid. There's, of course, no load shedding from Eskom at the moment. Chifularo Mashava is the Chief Executive Officer at City Power. Chifularo, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
When you say load reduction, are you switching some areas off completely at certain times, or are you reducing the amount of power to that area?
It's actually a combination, but at this point, what we're indicating is where we find that our system is overloading, we will then switch it off for a time period so that we bring the load down.
Why are you doing that? Is it because of illegal connections?
Predominantly, yes. So the main factor is illegal connections, and especially now in winter, we find that the usage is quite high. But over and above illegal connections is the fact that people go ahead and construct back rooms. So even if they're not connected illegally, they're connected legally, but you find that it it makes us exceed our notified maximum demand.
Okay, so I understand that happens, but hasn't this been happening for a long time? I mean, the back rooms has been a feature of society in Johannesburg for at least 50, 60, 70 years. I realize that maybe it's just grown more quickly recently, but haven't you been able to invest in better infrastructure to stop this from happening as more people have moved into Joburg?
Unfortunately, it's not really an issue of infrastructure. It's an issue of available electricity. So our notified maximum demand at Eskom has reached its maximum capacity. So we do not have additional electricity to provide to those households. That's the reason why. So over the years, they have been building, we have been coping, and unfortunately now we have reached that limit.
Why is Joburg using more power from Eskom than it should be using, but not, say, Ekurhuleni or other places? I mean, what's happened in Joburg that's brought this, when surely the amount of building that goes on, etc. I mean, it happens in Cape Town too. There's a very large number of people who've moved into Cape Town recently. I mean, perhaps more than in Joburg, according to the last census. So why is it happening in Joburg and not in other places?
So actually, what we are doing is happening in other places as well. So as I speak to you now, Eskom in its own areas of supply, it's also implementing load reduction from time to time. So this is where all of us as utilities, if our systems are about to overload, especially because of illegal connections, we then get to reduce it. I suppose the only difference is maybe we have over-communicated it at this point in time, and we needed to over-communicate it because it's really the first time that we'll be implementing it at a large scale, although we have been doing this in the past.
From what I can see, and Shifalaro, tell me if I get this wrong, but I don't think this is happening in suburbs. This only seems to be happening in township areas or areas where there are informal settlements.
It actually happens in suburbs as well. So Malberton, for example, what we've been doing there is we've been implementing geyser control. So instead of actually switching off the whole substation, we just send signals and then we switch off their geysers. So it happens everywhere. So it just depends on the technology. So where we've got smart meters, that's where we can then say we'll be able to do smart meter load limiting. Where we know that we've got geyser control technology, we can then do geyser control technology. Where unfortunately there's no smart meters or there are no geysers and the system is overloading because of illegal connections, that's where we actually switch off.
So I realize that load shedding is a particular term used by Eskom and other people, which is really planned power cuts. And you're also doing planned power cuts. So why do you call it load reduction and not load shedding? I mean, would it not be better to say, maybe I should have said at the beginning, that in fact City Power was implementing load shedding rather than load reduction? So it's not Eskom load shedding, it's City Power load shedding, because isn't it actually load shedding that you're implementing?
So I don't think it would work if we were to call it load shedding because it will create so much confusion. Load shedding is regulated. We all get our schedules for load shedding from Eskom side. Now, if we are to do our own load reduction and we call it load shedding, I think that would create confusion. And as I indicated before, other utilities also do it. They don't call it load shedding either. So it is load reduction.
Okay, but it's the same thing. You don't have enough electricity, so you're switching certain areas off.
Correct, yes. So, but because of different factors. So in this instance, it's isolated to that particular area that is affected. So if we've got an area with a lot of illegal connections and our system is about to overload, we switch it off. So it is for that reason. They're using more than what they should be using. And as such, we are switching it off. It's not to say we've run out. So we've got enough for our customers. So we've got enough capacity to service our customers. Unfortunately, from time to time, you'll have those that put in back rooms without notifying us, or you'll have illegal connections in the system.
Chifalaro Moshaba, thank you. Chief Executive Officer at City Power, you're there, SFM, leading the conversation, 8 o'clock.
In our top stories, a major strike at Sibanye-Stillwater looms and French president calls snap elections after defeat at EU polls. Good morning. Mining unions are threatening a full-blown strike at Sibanye-Stillwater after workers were served with notices of termination for staging an underground sit-in last week over a employee share ownership scheme. The Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union AMCU and the National Union of Mine Workers are demanding the reinstatement of the miners. NUM in Rustenburg's regional secretary Jeffrey Mwadzi says the mining unions held a meeting yesterday.
We met with AMCU on the aim of addressing workers jointly, and it is the feeling of the trade unions that we should take the employer head on. It's the same company that we took a march against in Carltonville around May over the issue of retrenchments. Now, if you deal with an Arabian company like Sibanye, which is a law into itself, it's only fair that workers should unite and put aside union affiliation.
Lawyers for the Umkhonto weSizwe party have sent a letter of demand to the Secretary of Parliament, Xolile George, and the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, asking both officers to refrain from convening the first sitting of Parliament. MK party lawyers have told SABC News that failure to comply with the letter of demand would result in court action. Kenny Mapanga reports.
This demand comes after the IEC officially handed over lists of members of Parliament and provincial legislatures to the Chief Justice, who handed them over to the Secretary of Parliament, paving the way for the swearing-in of members soon. The MK party has had a number of grievances since the results were declared by the IEC, with the party contending that they need to be resolved prior to the first sitting of Parliament.
The trial of husband and wife Sibusiso and Lerato Mahlangu, accused of killing Lerato's former boyfriend and father of a child, Sibusiso Sitebe, will resume in the High Court in Pretoria. The two are accused of killing Sitebe to claim a 500,000 rand life insurance. The state alleges the deceased was invited to the couple's home where he was attacked by the husband before setting him alight. Pumzile Mlangeni reports.
The police uncovered Mahlangu's identity after he was arrested driving a stolen vehicle during a roadblock in Hammanskraal in April last year. The pair are facing premeditated murder charges, fraud and defeating the ends of justice. Last week, the court ruled a statement made by Sibusiso Mahlangu to the police was made voluntarily and should be admitted as evidence. This follows his objection to the statement, arguing he was coerced.
Johannesburg Emergency Services say over 300 people died due to fire-related incidences since July last year. It says during the same period it received more than 1,880 fire incident calls. This comes as the Johannesburg Public Safety Department embarks on a winter fire safety and burns prevention campaign in Kaya Sands today. Joburg Emergency Services spokesperson Xolile Kumalo says following the Usindiso building fire in the Johannesburg CBD that led to the deaths of 77 people, they've discovered 643 inner-city buildings do not comply with the city's bylaws.
City of Johannesburg EMS is committed in ensuring the safety of its residents by providing educational programs and information to reduce fire incidents. We implore the residents of the city to be extra cautious when using electrical appliances.
Further afield, and finally, President Emmanuel Macron has scored a snap parliamentary vote in France after his alliance lost heavily to the far right in the European Union elections. He said dissolving parliament was a serious decision, but it was also an act of trust in the French people. The National Rally Party is projected to win a record 32% in the vote. Its leader, Marine Le Pen, welcomed the results.
Les Français se sont exprimés.
The French have spoken, and this historic election shows that when the people vote, the people win. By giving more than 32% to the National Rally, the French have just given us the highest score. All parties combined in 40 years. It's a real emotion to see this beautiful popular force rising up throughout the country.
Recapping the top story, mining unions are threatening a joint full-blown strike at Sibanye-Stillwater after workers were served with notices of termination for staging an underground sit-in last week over the employee share ownership scheme. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you in your SFM sports headlines. It's cricket action today. The Proteas are set to secure a Super 8 spot against Bangladesh. And in motorsport, South Africa's Kelvin van der Linde extends his championship lead with a thrilling Zandvoort podium finish. We'll have the details for you just before 8:30.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Driving up through Joburg this morning, you might want to avoid the Mike 1 towards Sandton. It's really heavily backed up. There's literally a queue from Gold Reef City right through to a point between Glenhove and Corler Drive. So Boyson's right through to Melrose, very heavy. The N3 still jam-packed between Elan's Interchange and Modderfontein Road, including a crash and some roadworks before you get to Gillily's Interchange. R21 towards the airport, queuing. Don't forget about that. The roadwork's still there as we get into a new week at Clayville, and it's quite heavy. Bit of traffic out of Pretoria as well. The N1 Garsfontein down towards the R21 looking very slow. We warn you about the Durban situation on the M4. The top end of the M4 is closed to Brook Street. It's now very heavy. Big queues from Umbilo up through Kongela into the CBD, and then a sort of just a divert in some impossibly thick traffic around Warwick Avenue, Warwick Triangle Market area. Also backlog coming out of that M4 on Victoria Embankment. So with both the Embankment and the Brook Street off-ramps clogged up, the M4 nowhere to go, but just a queue heavily into city centre this morning. Cape Town Marine Drive, that's super bad from Sunningdale all the way through to Sunset Beach, and quite heavy on the N7 North with queues from Goodwood through to the Bosmansdam Road exit. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
8 after 8, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Lots to come in. Mediated conversations about the process of debt review. Seems there's some difficulties emerging with that process. Once you're in it, very difficult to get out of it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Cause coming about the Comrades Marathon. We'll talk more about Benylin cough syrup. We'll talk also about WhatsApp and how that's changing. Good to hear from you this morning on 086 000 2032. Good morning. It's 8 after 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
The Comrades Marathon yesterday, and of course, Gerda Steyn breaking her own record. Nontsika on the line from Mthatha. Hi, the Comrades. Good morning.
Hi, Stephen. Good morning. Stephen.
Yeah.
Independent and impartial. You guys, you are not independent and impartial.
How do you get to that for the Comrades Marathon?
Makashule Ghana
Yes.
is a Comrades finisher. You couldn't,
Wow.
you couldn't interview Gerda Steyn because she's still sleeping, and yet you expect Makashule Ghana to be up and running. Stephen, that's has to make a day lighter. Stephen,
Yes.
I think
You've succeeded, yes?
what the new drafters of the Constitution going forward will need to look at is a big void in our Constitution.
Yeah.
Most critically, to look at matters of crisis like the one or the impasse we are in. What is that crisis, Stephen? What is happening is that many constitutions, they've got clauses which deal with crisis that would relate to referendums,
Yeah.
and they would also relate to snap elections, just like the French and the British are doing. And yet our constitution is found wanting regarding that. And we must expect that we will always have crises because we think for the now and not for the future. And I think, Stephen, if you guys going forward, you can invite such guys like Prof. Mervyn Kumede to pronounce on such things so that at the end of the day, we don't find ourselves in a crisis like this one.
So, Nontsika, yeah, look, I mean, so in parliamentary systems, I mean, in Britain in the 1970s, once had 2 elections in 1 year, you know, because they were in such a crisis. Our system doesn't really allow that, but I don't know if we're in a crisis yet. I think we're in a crisis 2 weeks from now if Parliament hasn't met, but I don't think we're in a crisis yet. I think we've got a little way to go first.
Parliament hasn't met, Stephen, but the stipulation that a government should be formed within or after 14 days, it is on the assumption that the ANC will rule till Jesus comes back, But now it doesn't accommodate for a situation whereby there might not be a continuation of the erstwhile ruling party. It should be dictated by the constitution. It should not. We should not depend on the intelligence and wisdom of Du Stanza and Stephen Grootes, because you guys now currently are the only one who are informing the public opinion.
Well, Nsika. But we don't run comrades, that's why.
No, that's true. That's true. Have a nice day, brother.
Nsika, thank you very much. I really appreciate your point. Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you. Janusz is on the line from Cape Town. Janusz, you're in Cape Town. I presume you didn't run comrades. Your thoughts on coalitions?
Well, I'm 75, so a little bit too late for me. So maywhy not? But maybe. But would like to talk about election in Europe, what happened just now.
Yes.
And it's actually a big change there, because so-called far-right organization party, they are winning there because they are sick and tired of this, sort of pro-Eastern, pro-African immigration. People of this country, they are sick and tired of this law, which actually imposed on them, and the crime committed by this immigrants was always covered, and the social life was also changed. The religions actually are imposed now.
Well, I don't think they're imposed on anyone, Janusz. But anyway, make your point.
Yes, of course. But I've got many friends in Germany, and you say imposed. My friend, she was walking on the street of Paris, and she had a cross on her neck, and then a Muslim guy came and grabbed her, beat her, and took her cross, because how can you have a cross on your? And so these are religious things as well.
Janusz, I'm not entirely sure I understand what you're saying. I don't know what you mean.
Okay, but people of Europe are sick and tired of this pro-leftist government. They choose their sort of right wings, and the parties which going to protect the nation more than than Europe, and they're going to try to stop the immigration. Because it's too many of them.
But they also have a labour shortage, Janusz, and we've had this conversation many times. But they have a labour shortage, and it's gonna bite them later.
But with all this robotic schools coming and all this mechanization and everything, the labour shouldn't be an issue. It's going to be used properly. But anyway, these immigrants are coming there. They're taking their social money, and they don't want to produce anything.
Janusz.
Stop all the. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there, Janusz. I don't think we need to talk about that at this point, and I think that tone as well we need to just watch a little bit. Peter in Durban. Peter, hi, good morning. Coalitions.
Yes, hi, Stephen. Thanks for taking the call. Two quick observations in terms of the time limits that are faced by Parliament. I would have thought the Constitutional Court could extend the time. I may be wrong.
I don't know if they can. I mean, it's pretty. It's pretty clear in the context. So what you would apply for, I suppose, because the Constitution says 14 days full stop, is you would apply for a condonation or a leave to break the Constitution, I suppose.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
correct. And I mean, if it's in the national interest, I can't see how the court would be non-suited. But Stephen, the second thing quickly is the EFF. I've heard very little from Mr. Malema on these results. As the Afrikaans say, he's being kept still.
Yes.
And it's interesting how poorly they performed, in my view. And I think that perhaps he's got to take a look at how he's leading and the party and where they're going from here. They might have had votes lost to the MK and Natal, but it seems to me that the rest of the country, they performed extremely poorly, given the socio-economic issues that we face and the young voters, etc. So I don't know. I was very interested to see their results.
I think that MK did take some of their votes, Peter, but I mean, I know the voting district analyses haven't been done fully yet. I think they're still coming, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yeah.
All right, Peter, thank you. Appreciate that. Pule and Matlasana, MK in Parliament, hi.
Yes, Steve, how are you?
Yeah, I'm well, Pule. Just clearly, if you can, please go for it.
Yes, yesterday you brought a guy who was explaining the Constitution very well in terms of and that was bravo to you, in terms of how we are going to vote, 1/3 and so
So
forth.
on Friday it was Kalila George, the Secretary to Parliament, yes.
Yes, it was, you were spot on, he was spot on. Jabulani Khumalo will be sworn in. Whether MK party likes it or not, he's in the list, he's going to be sworn in. So we have been having the understanding that it's a party that can withdraw and send a person, but the list has been submitted with the IEC, and that list is final. And Jabulani Khumalo, only Jabulani Khumalo from MK party will be sworn in as a member of parliament. The other thing, Steve Ovo, is I don't know the case. You ask evidence from the spokesperson. He refused to give evidence. Why are they hiding evidence? You were castrated. Show us the evidence. It is true. Show us the evidence that the election were rigged. I don't think election were rigged because they have no evidence. They thought they'll get 2/3 majority and change the constitution that will suit Zuma. But I'm happy with the results. Lastly, DA must not put demand that they don't want EFF and NK to form a government. They mustn't put demand. Then ANC is then created. Let us come together, all of us. We have lost the election. No one has won. Let us sit down and form a government of national unity and move on. But DA said exclude, they want include. They think they are better than any other person. So if they don't want it, let them go to opposition benches. That's my substitution.
Yeah. All right. No, Pule. Interesting. Thank you. On the line from Matlasana, I hear you. Okay. I think a lot's going to happen. I think they're going to be court cases. I think a lot's going to happen. Let's see what happens. You were there, SAFM. It's 18 minutes after 8.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
You may remember a couple of weeks ago, I remember long before the election, starting a show talking about the Benylin cough syrup, and it had been recalled in certain countries, in Nigeria in particular, and I think Tanzania, and as a result of that, was recalled here as well. Now, it's been clear the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority has been looking at this as a particular type of cough syrup, and they've realized that there are no problems with it at all from what they can see. Well, the Senior Manager of Inspectorate and Regulatory Compliance at the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority is Dion Pulven. Dion, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So you had to go through these batches of Benylin, and there seemed to be nothing wrong with it. What kind of investigation was conducted?
Yeah, so a full root cause investigation was conducted on the manufacture of the batches by the manufacturer. But what SAPRA had done was actually conduct independent testing of samples of these two batches of Benylin Pediatric that we had recalled to see if we could find the traces of diethylene glycol in there. And what we had found after having these tested is that we couldn't find any traces of diethylene glycol. So we reported on that back to the public.
Okay. Do you have to test every single part of the batch? How do you do that? I mean, you won't be able to get them all back, obviously. So you have to test whatever you get.
Yes. So we were able to get samples of these two batches, and then we were able to test them. And when we tested them, we tested specifically for the diethylene glycol presence, because that is what we were most concerned about. So we utilized a very specific method that was developed by the WHO and tested it and found that there were no traces of diethylene glycol in these two batches.
Do we know how it's been found? We understand. I don't know if you've had access to the raw data or the raw batches that were tested in other countries where this was found. It's made by the same company. It may be in the same factory. I don't know. But it has. So it's been found in other places, but not here. Do we know where it would have come in from? Why it would be in one place but not the other?
So it was reported only from the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, in Nigeria. So they provided the initial public alert. Once that public alert had been published, SAPRA, as the authority which has the manufacturer in its borders, then conducted an investigation and found that it had been distributed to other countries. So that's how we had all the other countries from Africa then implicated in this recall. So we had discussions with our counterparts in Nigeria, asking them for information. They did provide us with their test results and those sorts of things. But as an independent regulatory authority here in South Africa, we obviously had to do our own investigation. And being a science-based organization, this is what the science told us, saying that we actually couldn't find any diethylene glycol in these batches and therefore reported it as such.
Okay, so you can only test what you see in South Africa. You can't test what's tested somewhere else, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And we don't yet know how at all, from any of the investigations you've done, where the stuff could have come from in other places. It's a very curious story in some ways, but it also gets to the heart of how we know that medicines are safe. And I presume you do some tests before they're put on the open market in the first place?
So what we do as the regulatory authority is we would register medicine. So when we register a medicine, we would look at its data in terms of quality, which means how you make it, how you test it, what tests you do, what the risks are associated with what you're putting in there. And then also we look at the clinical data. So when we register a product, we will look at all of that, but we will also look at the good manufacturing practices that the manufacturer puts in. Right? So a manufacturer must make sure that there's no contamination that happens during manufacture or no cross-contamination. So the manufacturer that we have here in South Africa, licensed by SAHPRA, inspected according to good manufacturing practices, has the product registered with SAHPRA. So by looking at all of that, the risk factors for getting this sort of substance like diethylene glycol have been mitigated. However, this particular substance, what happens is that there can be contamination within the supply chain. So, for example, your excipient that you use, or what we would call the raw material that you're using in the manufacture of these batches, could actually be contaminated with diethylene glycol, and that's how it gets into the product. But with our licensed manufacturers here implementing good manufacturing practices, they will make sure that does not get in there.
Thank you very much indeed. Dion Pooven is the Senior Manager for Inspectorate and Regulatory Compliance at the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. Dion, thank you.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Jonathan on the line from Gqeberha. Jonathan, hi. Driving licenses. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, so from a business perspective, we used to have these access cards with a little photograph on, and I think they migrated to barcode scanning where you scan at the gate.
Yes.
But I mean, now we've evolved to biometric access, so you can't obviously forge your fingerprint. And with post-COVID, you now also have contactless fingerprint access readers. So yeah, I mean, what's stopping the police or traffic from having these mobile devices and then scan? And I mean, you can't, as I said, forge your fingerprints. And then also they can have all access in terms of outstanding fines and so forth. So the technology does exist instead of carrying around a card.
It must be a lot cheaper. I mean, if you consider how much this machine to print the driver's license cards is going to cost, and then you sort of, plan it out over 5 or 10 years to issue police officers with whatever device they need, or, a cell phone has a fingerprint reader. I realize it's a different thing slightly. But you must be right, Jonathan. I mean, it's a very 20th century solution, what we have at the moment.
Exactly. And it's also, like I said, I mean, this forgery of cards are so at this stage. So, yeah.
Can't forge your driver's license. Thank you, Jonathan Gqeberha. Active citizen, Mr. Citizen, good morning in Limpopo.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Go for it.
Fine. Actually, we should celebrate the fact that the EFF is not willing to go into government of national
Why
unity.
is that?
That is a blessing. That is a blessing in disguise. My brother, imagine having the former Alex Mafia as a deputy president, as opposed to be having Stijn Hazen as a deputy president. I mean, if this coalition fails, it means Paul Mashatile will become the deputy president of the Republic of South Africa. Yet we still have got him not being able to explain how...
Hold on. Active citizen, just go back a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm so confused. You're saying you're glad the EFF is not going to be there, right?
Yeah, and I'm saying that is a blessing in disguise to all South Africans.
Why?
Yes. Because if they succeed with their agenda, we will have an Alex Mafia in the name of Paul Mashatile becoming the deputy president of South Africa. Remember, this very same Paul Mashatile he is unable to explain how did he manage to buy over 200 and something million house in Cape Town. How
he says it's not his, that it's his friend. Edwin Sodi is his friend.
The same house that he said is not his, he declared it in the parliamentary whatever, that it is his property. So that is a serious contradiction. So imagine having a deputy president who's not able to explain himself, who's contradicting himself. Number two, imagine having Fresh Bambu as a Minister of Finance. Can't we perform better if we can have Helen Zille as a Minister of Finance of the Republic of South Africa? So we must look at what we gain and what we lose with these people called the leftists of the ANC. And those people, this rented empty gun in the name of the president of the ANC Youth League. We know he is already on the payroll of the Alex Mafia. The thing that is saying he's saying everything because he wants to follow on the footsteps of all other former presidents of the Youth League of owning the houses that they cannot even afford. You remember the last Maine owned the house. That is the bond on that house. What is the monthly premium on that house was even far much more than the salary he earns as the president of the ANC Youth League. So we know he wants to follow on those footsteps of those people. But where does this country go with those people?
Active citizen, I mean, I hear you. You haven't provided much evidence. And as I say, Mashatile says that no, the house that he's used in Cape Town, he's only been there when his friend Edwin Sodi is there, etc. But I hear you, but I can hear your sentiment as well. You with SAFM 27 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. We really would like that win against Bangladesh today.
Absolutely, and I hope it's going to be an epic showdown. The Proteas, they are on fire, and of course, Aiden Markram's leadership has been stellar. This is the T20 World Cup Super 8s, which is a crucial match for the Proteas. They'll take on Bangladesh today at 4:30 p.m., all happening at the Nassau County International Cricket Stadium. A win will mark their third consecutive victory in Group D, led by Captain Markram. With just one more match against Nepal left, the Proteas aim to use today's game as a springboard for the Super 8s. Soccer now, the SuperSport United head coach Gavin Hunt has played down the speculation around his future and maintains that he is still interested in continuing with his job at SuperSport United. SABC Sport reported that Hunt had been offered to join Sekhukhune United. Hunt's contract at SuperSport United expires at the end of this month, but SABC Sport understands the two parties are still some way off from agreeing terms. Speaking after graduation with a CAF A licensed coaching badge, this is what Hunt had to say.
Is that the only reason why? Because I've got a CAF A license, can sit on the bench? No, yeah, look, I mean, there's been a lot of, we've been actually, when you come here, you get tucked away a little bit, and you from reality. So I'll get back in this afternoon and we'll get back on what's going on. There's not much going on at the moment.
Let's go to Gerda Steyn, who has a lot going on. Fresh off her record-breaking victory at the Comrades Marathon, she's now setting her sights on representing South Africa at the Olympics. Steyn's incredible endurance speed has made her a standout in long-distance running, and she's focused on making her country proud.
Aware of the class of athletes that go to the Olympics. It's the Olympics. It's the biggest stage in athletics. I know where my performance lie in terms of the rest of the world's best marathon athletes, and I want to be logic about my expectations. So the goal that I've set out for myself to do is to improve on my position from 20 and the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, where I finished in 15th place. I believe that it is the highest position for a South African to finish in an Olympic marathon. So for me to improve on that position would be a great honour. So hopefully it will play out in that way.
We apologise for the poor sound quality. And finally, some motorsport news. Marco Wittmann of Schubert BMW was the surprise winner of Race 2 at the Circuit Zandvoort in the Netherlands, which is round 6 of the 2024 DTM season. Italy's Mirko Bortolotti and Kelvin van der Linde of South Africa finished second and third respectively, van der Linde increasing his lead in the championship standings to 8 points over Bortolotti. That's a wrap of your sport on Sunrise. We'll bring you more sport on SAFM around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. The process of debt review, that's next. You're with SAFM leading the conversation, 8:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, there's 6 days left for a parliament to be formed before a government of national unity or a coalition is formed. Mining unions are threatening a joint full-blown strike at Sibanye-Stillwater after workers were served with notices of termination for staging an underground sit-in last week over the employee share ownership scheme. And Israel's telecoms regulator has extended its ban on Al Jazeera's operations in the country. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still lots of traffic through Joburg up to Sandton this morning between Boysons and point between Glenhove and Caller Drive. So Boysons through to Melrose, just a lot of traffic moving slowly. There's just been a crash on the Mike 1 South before Marlborough Drive. So coming off the N1 Midrand on your way to Sandton, that's also quite heavy as well. And the N1 South backlogging through Brockfontein down to Old Joburg Road. Looks like something's happened around that Centurion off-ramp. Durban's M4 heavy this morning into the CBD. You've got the closure of Brook Street at the top of the M4 Southern Freeway, and you've got a very heavily congested Victoria Embankment Esplanade coming off the highway down in towards the CBD. So basically, the top of the M4, the traffic's got absolutely nowhere to go. Both exits are blocked, and there's a big backlog right through to Umbulo territory. It's very heavy. Once you get north of the M7, you're in big trouble there in terms of traffic. So maybe South Coast Road and those options to the side of the M4 might get you through a bit quicker this morning. Cape Town, a crash on Marine Drive before Sunset Beach if you're leaving Tableview. That's the reason for the backlog, which is unusual for this time of morning, but it's parking back through Bayside, back onto the West Coast Road and deep back into Sunningdale territory. The N7 North is heavy from Goodwood up towards that problematic Bosman's Dam Road exit, and still plenty of traffic on the M3 from Bishop's Court, heavy to UCT, but stays busy right into Hospital Bends. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
28 minutes now to 9 the time. Good morning. Time for your first mediated conversation of the week. I don't know if you or anyone you know has ever been placed under a system called debt review. Under the system, what's supposed to happen is that a person who's finding it difficult to get out of debt to make their payments is put under the supervision of a debt counsellor. That counsellor helps them to restructure the debt. They investigate the situation. They work out what's the best way to help that person pay what they owe. During this process, the person can be put under debt review by a court. During that period, while they're under debt review, you cannot take out any more credit. It now appears that some people are being stuck in the system, and some may also be abused, and that people are phoning them and offering them a debt review service when they don't need it. In the end, they can't get out of the debt review process, and so they cannot borrow any more money. So then what exactly is happening, and what is the National Credit Regulator doing about it? First this morning, Maya Fisher-French is a financial consumer journalist. Then Timmy van der Grip is legal advisor at the Debt Counselling Department of the National Credit Regulator. And finally, Benay Sager is the executive head of Debt Busters. We start then with Maya Fisher-French, a journalist who specialises in financial consumer journalism. Maya, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, when you're under debt review, what happens? What's the process meant to achieve?
So maybe just to give some background, so debt counselling came into effect in 2006 as part of the National Credit Act. And the intention, Stephen, is great. You know, if you're a consumer, you become over-indebted, life happens, you may be at risk of losing your home or your car, you can apply for debt review. And this is a court-ordered agreement where creditors agree to a repayment schedule that is a lot more affordable for the consumer. In many cases, they may even agree to an interest rate reduction, and they aim to try and solve for the debt within 5 years. And as long as the consumer sticks to the agreement and makes the payment, they are protected from legal action. So that, in essence, is what debt review is.
While you're in that process, does that stop you from getting new credit?
Well, this is the key point. That's exactly it. It's actually, although it's wonderful if you need it, it's extremely onerous. You cannot access any credit until your debts are repaid. And those are any debts that were part of that court-ordered agreement, except for your home loan. You can exit if you just have your home loan outstanding. And, Stephen, I've seen so many people who've benefited from debt review. I've written about it, but I'm seeing more and more people who are being put into debt review without requiring it, and actually through very unscrupulous behaviour, and that's really the big concern.
I'm going to come to that. When you're in debt review, you wouldn't be able to use your credit card, for example, or you wouldn't be able to use a store card or anything like that.
You cannot use your store card, credit card, nothing. So you are switched off from all credit. You definitely need to have an emergency fund if you're in debt review.
Okay, so then when it comes to consumer rights, and this is the abuse you're talking about, what exactly is going wrong here?
Stephen, I don't know if you've received these calls. I have, and I'm sure many of your listeners have, where someone phones and they say, oh, we've been asked by the National Credit Regulator, or we've been asked by some government database to come and assist you in reducing your interest rates on your loans. So the consumer thinks, oh, this sounds interesting. They give some basic information, and next thing is they actually discover they're under debt review. I get these complaints all the time. I do refer them to the NCR, but the feedback I'm getting from consumers, they're not getting much luck there. And I actually followed a very specific case which I wrote about because this particular consumer was nowhere near over-indebted. He just had car finance, that's it, very capable, very able to pay it off. His credit score was, I think, 700, which is excellent, and had one of these calls. And he specifically said, are you a debt counselor? And they said, no, we're not, but we can help you with your interest rate. He asked a few questions. He never signed anything, according to him. He never sent any of his ID documents. Next thing is he was under debt review. He's been under debt review for over a year. He's got a small business. He's been unable to use his credit card. It is the most awful, awful thing that he is completely and utterly trapped into. And he even paid this company fees to try and get out, and he stayed under. And it's these stories, Stephen, that we are hearing more and more of.
How could someone go through a court-mandated process if they haven't signed any documents?
Well, this is the thing is, he hasn't even got to court yet, but you can go, and this, Stephen, is probably my biggest issue that I have with the current legislation, is you can be put into debt review before the court case is even heard. So in other words, you are flagged on the debt help system that sits with the NCR as being under debt review before the court order happens. So from the moment that happens, you are put in. So basically, you complete something called Form 16, which he didn't really do, but technically you're supposed to. The debt counselor then has permission to get all your information. From there, they make an assessment and decide whether or not you are over-indebted. If they deem you to be over-indebted, they are mandated to put you into debt review. And then the flag goes up on the debt help system, becomes status C, and that informs all your creditors and all other potential creditors that you are under debt review, even before the court order has happened.
Okay, so someone is cold calling. Someone's phoning up Stephen and saying, hi, answer a few questions, and on the basis of that one single conversation, I end up on debt review.
Exactly, that is what's happening. Whether that's legal or not is the question, but that is currently what's happening at the moment.
Why does the person do that? What do they get from it?
They get fees. So they're after a few things. So the one is that the first 2 months of your installments go to the debt counselor to cover their fees. So that's where the money is. It's a lot of money up front for debt counselors, which is motivating them, obviously, to put people into debt review, perhaps even if they don't need it. But in this particular case, what they did to him was they said, well, when he said, listen, I want to get out of debt review, they said, well, you've got to pay us 5,600 Rand for restructuring fees and reckless lending investigation fees. They just made up all these fees. And in desperation, obviously, he paid it and still remained under debt review. But what we're also picking up, Stephen, is that there are actual syndicates working this now. So we've got a list of directors of companies. They're directors of multiple debt counseling businesses. They just keep opening new ones with these call centers. And in fact, often the addresses are just a placeholder. There's no actual operation there. But then they are also directors of what they call debt help companies. All these companies that are advertising out there saying, we can help you get out of debt review. So it seems to me what they're doing is they're putting people in debt review on the one hand and then getting another of their companies to contact those people and say, if you pay us 9,000 Rand, we'll get you out of debt review on the other side. And then they try and set up some sort of system where they can try and raise a query with the NCR or whatever they're doing. But it looks like it's an actual syndicate, system working here. These are real culprits. And the thing is, Stephen, right now there are 1.3 million people under debt review, but only 250,000 who are actually paying every month. So there's basically 1.1 million people out there who don't want to be in debt review, And if somebody phones them and says, we can lift your debt review for a fee, they're going to be very tempted to do so, even though in most cases they can't even get out then. So that's really the issues going on at the moment.
Okay, so if someone's in debt review, they should be able to go, I presume, to the NCR and say this should not have happened and it should be lifted. And that's not happening.
No. I know you have got Timmy coming on, but certainly this is what happened in the case that I followed. I think he'd been under debt review since May 2023. When he eventually came to me, I said to him in February, go to the NCR. And I've been tracking the case since February. And literally, despite all the information that's been given, all the back and forth emails, it was finally lifted on Friday, Stephen. And call me cynical, but there was this interview today. You know, that is what it's taken on a case that was so clear-cut fraud. I don't know if it becomes more nuanced, how anyone's supposed to get any service.
Maya, thank you. Maya Fisher-French is a financial consumer journalist. Starting us off this morning, your conversation around debt review. You were there, SFM, leading the conversation. It's 19 minutes now to 9. Your mediated conversation on this issue continues. Timmy van der Grip is the legal advisor in the Debt Counselling Department in the National Credit Regulator. Timmy, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
Firstly, is it legal to cold call someone, to cold call Stephen and say, Stephen, we want to look at your debts, and then put me under debt review without me signing anything?
Stephen, no. The protection of personal information is the first hurdle to answer your question. First, where did I get your information from? And this is something that the NCR has picked up quite a while back, and have engaged with the information regulator extensively on a memorandum of working together as to sharing information that the NCR receives on these cold calls. Because as you can imagine, where consumers then pick up that they were misled or told that they would be getting a consolidation loan, which is a big thing, or where consumers were not properly told as to what their information would be used for, that can then be forwarded to the information regulator, and that problem can be tackled from both the sides, from the information space as well as from the credit space. So these cold callings are a problem. It has been for a while. The NCR picked that up with a registrant that was in Cape Town a while back, and that had literally almost 100,000 consumers. And the general theme when we spoke to those consumers at the time were that we don't know what we were getting into. Suddenly we were placed under debt review. And, strangely enough, we investigated the matter. We then came to a conclusion that there was a general disregard for consumer rights, especially what Maya was speaking about. And we took it to the Consumer Tribunal, and we had the debt counsellor that was doing these things deregistered.
Okay. There are a couple of things here, Timmy, and sorry, we are going to be a bit rushed for time. But you have to be registered to put someone under debt review, right? You have to be a debt counsellor who's registered.
Correct. You need to do a compulsory course that is run by the NCR. Sure. You need to write an exam. You have to have 2 years' experience within the financial...
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Once that person is working once that person is registered, how often do you check on what they're doing?
Well, once a year. There's about 700 active debt counsellors. There's about 1,700 registered, but only 700 or so are active, and there are active compliance monitoring that the NCR does on it. And further, we can investigate them outside of compliance monitoring where we find that there are excessive complaints and so on.
Okay, from what Maya Fisher-French says, there are 1.3 million people under debt review. Is that right?
Yeah, that's more or less right.
Okay, and only 200,000 are actually paying.
Correct. And remember, there could be a skew in the figures because not everybody uses a payment distribution agency. The consumers does not have to. So those are the figures that we could pick up from the payment distribution agencies, but it's more or less right.
Okay, but that means the vast majority, let's just say for argument's sake, around 1 million people are under debt review and their lives are not getting any better. They're not paying off the debt, which means that the whole system is not working.
That is not correct. I think it's a step too far to go with that. Consumers can pay credit providers directly, and that will not pick up on the payment distribution reports that the NCR receives on a quarterly basis. So, but again, Stephen, we always say at the NCR, consumers need to be active with their credit records. I mean, it's their credit records that is out there. It's their lives that are affected by it. And, the debt counsellor is always accessible. The consumer must go and speak to the debt counsellor, must find out what the problem is, must keep on top of their finances. How far before this is paid? How far before that is paid? Just because a consumer applies for debt review does not mean it exonerates them from taking responsibility for their finances.
But Timmy, and you we can fight about this as much as we like. We can be upset about it, but for most people, money is a complete mystery. It's like asking, why is the sky blue? Like, you can complain about it. It just is. My concern is that, and I realize you're confined to what you can do legally, but clearly the system's not working if you say that that roughly 1 million people are actually in debt review but are not making any progress. I mean, it must be that the system is not working.
Stephen, and the NCR recognized that quite a while back. 2019, we were very actively involved in matters that went to the High Court here in Johannesburg. Had 3 judges that were appointed to look specifically at when consumers, in terms of the law, and you're absolutely right, the NCR's hands are tied as to the legislation that we fall under. And we ran a matter in front of 3 judges, and the judges gave judgments as to when consumers can exit debt review and how they can do that. So the NCR has been very proactive in trying to solve this issue that has been a problem and has been a sore thumb, as Maya said, over the past few years.
Okay. At the moment, if you want to get out of debt review, how long is that process supposed to take? If you're paid up and all the rest, it's supposed to take, 90 days, 3 months?
When your debt is paid up, the debt counsellor must issue you a clearance certificate. That expunges all the records regarding your debt review, and within 21 days, it'll be off the credit bureaus.
Okay.
That is in terms of the Act.
Okay. And if the debt counsellor just runs away, if they're part of the syndicate or whatever it is, if they started all of this with criminal intent. Now, I'm Stephen. I'm under debt review. I have no idea how I really got there. All I know is I answered a phone call from someone. How would I even know where to start?
Stephen, it's when you apply for debt review, you sit with a problem. You know that you as a consumer are over-indebted.
But that's not what's happened to me. What I'm talking about is people who are making money out of being a syndicate. They're phoning someone. They may or may not be registered. I have no idea how they do it. And they're having me placed under debt review because they're after the 5,000 Rand fee.
It's actually much more than that, Stephen. Yeah, if you would give me a moment to answer. But it doesn't mean that all debt counsellors are bad. When consumers are under debt review and can't get hold of their debt counsellor or actually see that it is a syndicate, there are very, very good debt counsellors out there, and you've got one coming up after me. And there's transfer processes, easy transfer processes, whereby consumers can transfer to other debt counsellors, and we have very strict rules in place whereby fees need to be refunded for work that is not done. To a debt counsellor that is capable, able, and willing to do that work that was supposed to be done for you as a consumer in the first place. Remember, debt counselling, and as Maya said, can work very, very well. It can really change your life as a consumer, and it's a very, very good process if it's done properly. And there are many debt counsellors in the country, very, very good ones that will be able to assist you. If you see that there is a problem, contact the NCR or send a complaint through, and we will guide you as to where you need to go and what is the best assistance. And if you are eligible in terms of the law and that judgment that I told you about, to exit debt review. So there are options available. Consumers just need to use them.
People are clearly making money out of this, right? There's clearly abuse. And is there any action you're able to take against them? I mean, I keep coming back to this point. I don't understand how someone ends up in debt review without signing a document. I mean, there must be forgery and fraud there, and it requires a real proper investigation by the police and perhaps yourselves to stop this from happening. There's nothing that anyone said in this conversation that's going to stop this syndicate. They'll continue today.
Stephen, the rules are very clear. As to what needs to be done. I mean, there's 202 steps in the debt review process that the debt counsellor needs to follow until such time as the consumer is provided a clearance certificate. And they need to be compensated for the work done. So it's not that the money paid to them is for nothing. It is a seriously complicated process. It is very labor intensive, and there needs to be compensation for it. And the last time the fees were reviewed was 2018. So I mean it's quite a long time ago. So the fees are in place to make sure that the people that do the work is remunerated, but that the consumer get the absolute value for it. Now, obviously, the syndicates and all of those, and that debt council I spoke to you about with the 100,000 consumers that were deregistered, they did not. They did it for the fees. They take that first and the second fee from the consumer, and then that would be the end of the assistance. And that is exactly what debt counselling should not be. There's a Form 29 process that the regulator has got, where consumers will, in a form, set out their details as to why they are aggrieved, what is the outcome they require, and they then submit it to us. We then have an internal process where we monitor which debt counsellor has the most complaints or looks to be involved in these type of things, and we actively investigate them, both from the debt counselling department as well as the investigation and enforcement department.
Okay, and when you find they've done something wrong, I mean, anyone who gets a court or who puts someone under debt review without a signed document must have committed fraud. Must have.
Not necessarily. The Act indicates, and obviously we need to include rural people. We need to include people that are not as literate, as most of us are. And there is a process whereby certain documentation can only be provided other than a form being signed. Because there is inclusion within our societies. So it's not as clear-cut as you might think. But there has to be some indication, call recordings, signatures, the submission of documents. I mean, you won't just get into getting someone's last month's pay slips or 3 months bank statements or so on and so on. It's an indication that the consumer has provided that. But that there are abuse, absolutely. We are aware of it and we are dealing with it.
Timmy van der Grip, thank you. Legal advisor at the Debt Counselling Department of the National Credit Regulator. In a moment, the view of Benny Seger from Debt Busters. You with SFM, 8 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, there's a crash. We alluded to this last time we talked to you on the N1 South near the old Joburg Road exit in Centurion. So that traffic coming out of Pretoria, it's clear until you get to a point just after John Foster, and then you sit through Brockfontein and down towards that crash near the old Joburg Road exit. Also, collision on the bike one near Marlborough Drive. Traffic stays very slow from the N1 South Allendale Road into that, and the crash now on the N3 North before Modderfontein. So the traffic coming out from Germiston, Bedfordview has eased up nicely, but once you get north of Galulies up into Edenvale, that's where you'll get a problem with traffic build-up. Coming out of Pinetown towards Durban, you've got roadworks at Paradise Valley, plus a crash in that area as well. So quite heavy queues. St John's Avenue Bridge territory. From there on the M13, as you come off Fields Hill, you just hit that wall of traffic through towards the N3. Pietermaritzburg Durban section N3 looking okay. Good if you're on your way to Durban. Great news if you're on your way out of Durban after Comrades, perhaps over the weekend if you've recovered. And today's the day to get back up to inland provinces. The N3 is moving nicely. Cape Town, heavy traffic on the N7. Goodwood through towards Bosmansdam Road, and a long queue of traffic coming off the West Coast Road onto Marine Drive from Sunningdale side through Bayside down to a crash before you get to Sunset Beach territory. And worth mentioning, the N1 into town fairly heavy this morning from N1 City over the elevated freeway and into the city centre. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
6 minutes to 9. Continue your mediated conversation around the process of debt review. Ben Seger is the executive head at Debt Busters. Ben, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thanks for having me on the show.
You work in this space. Do you believe the National Credit Regulator, from what you've heard, is doing what it's supposed to be doing here?
So, Stephen, for disclaimer, I am a licensed debt counsellor myself, and my license is given by the National Credit Regulator. So, I think from a perspective of disclosure, I think it's important to say that. I think the National Credit Act and its regulations need an overhaul. I think that's the regulator can do what's in the Act, And I think I agree with what's been said, previously by both of the speakers. But I think it's important to recognize that the Act has been in force for about almost 20 years, and it's time for it to be updated based on all of the things that everyone has discussed. How do we bring it up to date with regards to allowing people the opportunity to exit debt review? I think you highlighted that. It's quite important because life happens for the good and for the bad, and I think we must cater for that. It's also important to bring it up to date as to, what's happened over the last 15 years with technology and all of the other things that might play into place. There's a few other things as well. We want it to be more in line with the other registrants of the National Credit Act, and also making provision for the newer acts such as CPA, which is Consumer Protection Act, as well as the Protection of Personal Information. Based on all of these things, I think our world today is very different from 2006, and I think some of the frustrations that have been expressed is directly as a result of not updating the Act and regulations.
It would seem what also needs to happen is that the people who are abusing the system need to be punished in some kind of way. Probably quite difficult to do, unfortunately. But people are abusing the system because they found a way to make, a little bit of money quite quickly.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair to the National Credit Regulator, I think they need a lot more resources than they have. If you think about the sophisticated and large country that we have with so many credit users, I think there's just not enough enforcement capacity at the National Credit Regulator. I think more needs to be dedicated to it. And also, like you say, I think any business attracts bad apples. Some of the things that you also mentioned, like for example, you can get a loan by having a voice recording, and I think the same is applied to debt counseling. So the rules, as long as they're applied the same, the outcome should be the same. But I think in this case, you're dealing with a slightly different thing that seems to attract particular set of bad apples, as we mentioned before. It's actually quite bad for the reputation of the industry. If I can just say what consumers can do about it, because I think it's important. I think for a consumer, if you are getting a call from somebody, you want to make sure that if you are signing up to something, whether you're doing it telephonically, whether you're signing on glass or signing physically, make sure that immediately after you ask a copy of what you signed. As a consumer, you have the right to do that. If you are not 100% sure why you're getting a phone call and someone says, as Maya said, we're calling you from national database. There is no national database. Let's just be honest. This is just a ploy that's used. There's no such thing as a national database or National Credit Regulator database. It doesn't exist. So I think you should just ask, where you got the information from. And lastly, if you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the entity, ask to visit their offices. Say, can I come to you in your office? I think many of the entities that Maya would have mentioned, if they're not in their offices, then that should be your first clue as to not to do business with such of these entities. I think those are some things that consumers can do if they feel like something is not 100% right.
And if you're stuck in the situation, transferring to another debt counsellor, is that difficult to do? That seemed to be the obvious solution if you're not happy. Is it a difficult process?
It is not, actually. We have to give credit to the National Credit Regulator. They designed and implemented a system that allows transfer in between debt counselors, and it is generally facilitated within 5 business days. That is not difficult, but I think it's the difficult part is finding exactly who to go to, and I think one needs to take the NCR's guidance on this. As Timmy said, they will be able to guide you if you feel you're stuck. And also happens that counselor may have deceased or they stop practicing or whatever the reasons might be. If you are looking for a new home, do your research and find where you want to go to, and then allow them to facilitate that transfer. That's not a difficult process.
Benny Saga, thank you very much indeed, Executive Head at Debt Busters. Do appreciate the time. My thanks today also to Timmy van der Grip, Legal Advisor at the Debt Counselling Department, the National Credit Regulator, and Maya Fisher-French, the Financial Consumer Journalist. Bringing an end to your mediated conversation this morning around the process of debt review. We do hear of people who get stuck in this process, and once again, when you answer your phone, make sure you understand who you're speaking to and why you're speaking to them and what it is they want from you. That may be the best question. If you get one of these phone calls, just make sure you understand what they want from you. And then the other thing, of course, and people have been telling me this since I was a child, so I'll repeat it. Understand your finances. Know exactly where you are. We'll be with you back tomorrow. I expect some developments in the coalitions tomorrow, over the next 24 hours. I really do. So from Mpo, Melissa, Stanzer, and myself, look after yourself. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
In our top stories, deadline looms to set up a new government and unions threaten a major strike at Sibanye Stillwater. Good morning. There is 6 days left for a parliament to be formed before a government of national unity or a coalition is formed. Parliament must first be constituted within 14 days of the declaration of the election results. The election of the Speaker, Deputy and the President are critical to the formation of a National Assembly, while the election of the President is critical to ensure the formation of a government. It only requires a quorum of 134 of the 400 members of the Assembly to elect the Speaker, Deputy or President. Mercedes Besent takes us briefly through the constitutional process.
Currently, there's no National Assembly in place. To form an assembly requires the swearing in of members, presided over by the Chief Justice or any judge designated by the Chief Justice. This is followed by the election of the Speaker, who will then preside over the election of the Deputy Speaker. Once the assembly has been fully constituted, the Chief Justice will be back in the chair to preside over the election of the President. The President-elect must be sworn in and inaugurated as President of the country within 5 days before he or she must appoint his cabinet and national executive from amongst members of the assembly to form a government.
The Patriotic Alliance has shown interest in becoming part of the Government of National Unity. After failing to secure a majority to constitute government, the ANC Special NEC put forward a proposal for a Government of National Unity. The Patriotic Alliance Deputy President Kenny Kunene has told SABC News they are waiting to see what the ANC has to put on the negotiation table.
Indeed, we met with the African National Congress negotiation team. As the Patriotic Alliance, we are keen to be part of the Government of National Unity. However, that will be determined by the offer that the ANC will put on the table for our constituencies. We've been consistent that we get into coalition with any political party, but we need to make sure that our constituencies are also respected and taken care of. So we are waiting for the ANC to get back to us, so that we can then discuss the details and the way forward. And we remain resolute that God must come back to schools and Abraham back.
Mining unions are threatening a joint full-blown strike at Sibanye Stillwater after workers were served with notices of termination for staging an underground sit-in last week over the employee share ownership scheme. The